The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Shadow Creek, a dusty frontier town clinging to existence along the edge of the Sonoran Desert. Main Street shimmered in the heat, its weathered buildings standing like tired sentinels against the oppressive glare. The year was 1874, and like most border towns, Shadow Creek existed in the uneasy space between civilization and lawlessness. Eleanor Hayes wiped the sweat from her brow as she arranged bottles behind the bar of the Eagle's Nest Saloon. At 35, she had the weathered beauty of a woman who had survived the frontier's harshest lessons. Her saloon served as the town's beating heart, a place where secrets flowed as freely as the whiskey. The bat-wing doors creaked open. Eleanor's hand instinctively moved toward the shotgun beneath the counter. A man stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the blinding light outside. Tall and lean, he wore a black duster coat despite the heat. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. As he stepped inside, the room seemed to darken with his presence. Eleanor watched him cross to the bar, noting the way he moved. Deliberate quiet like a mountain lion stalking prey. The worn Colt Walker holstered high on his hip looked like an extension of the man himself. "Whiskey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor poured the drink, studying him. His face was all hard angles and shadow, a short beard covering his jaw. But it was his eyes that held her attention. Pale blue, cold as winter ice, yet burning with something she recognized immediately. Loss, pain, purpose. "Passing through?" she asked, sliding the glass toward him. He took the whiskey, downed it in one swallow. "No." The single word hung in the air. Eleanor waited, but he offered nothing more. "Got a name at least?" He placed a coin on the counter. "Ethan Blackwood." "Well, Mr. Blackwood, rooms are $2 a night if you're looking." "Ah," he shook his head. "I've got a place." The news traveled fast in Shadow Creek. By sundown, everyone knew a stranger had purchased the abandoned Henderson Ranch 3 miles outside town. By the following morning, rumors swirled about the quiet man who paid cash, asked few questions, and whose eyes made even the town drunk think twice about starting trouble. Sheriff Marcus Sullivan watched Blackwood from his office window as the stranger loaded supplies into a wagon. At 63, Sullivan had worn a badge for 30 years, the last 15 in Shadow Creek. His face was a map of deep lines and faded scars, his once imposing frame now bent by time and the weight of compromise. "What do you make of him, Joseph?" Sullivan asked his deputy. Joseph Miller, bent and gray at 70, peered through spectacles that never seemed to sit right. "Man keeps to himself, paid for everything up front. Doc says he came in for some medical supplies, hardly said 2 words. Iluam." Sullivan's gaze followed Blackwood as he led his wagon out of town. "Keep an eye on him. Men that quiet are either running from something or hunting something." "Which do you reckon he is?" Sullivan sighed, feeling his age in his bones. "I hope to God he's running. This town's seen enough trouble." For 2 weeks, Blackwood was a ghost in Shadow Creek. He appeared only to purchase supplies, his visits brief and purposeful. People noticed things, though. He always positioned himself with his back to a wall. His eyes constantly scanned his surroundings. His right hand never strayed far from his Colt. Quinn Montgomery, Doc to everyone in town, saw Blackwood most often. The physician in his 50s with graying temples and steady hands supplied Blackwood with unusual requests, specific herbs, bandages, surgical spirits, building quite a medical kit. Doc commented one day. Blackwood's response was terse: "Best to be prepared." I mean, Eleanor Hayes saw more of the stranger than most. He took his meals at her saloon, when in town, always at the corner table facing the door. Unlike other customers, he never drank to excess, never engaged the working girls. One evening, she brought him a plate without being asked. "You don't have to serve me yourself," he said, looking up at her. "Wanted to see if the rumors were true?" She replied. "What rumors?" "That you can go days without speaking." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Don't have much to say. Everyone has a story, Mr. Blackwood." He cut into his steak. "Some stories are best left untold." Eleanor sat down uninvited, "And some need telling." Their eyes met, an unspoken challenge passing between them. For a moment, something in Blackwood's hard mask cracked. Vulnerability, perhaps, or recognition. Then it was gone. His expression stone once more. "The Henderson place," she said. "It needs work." Blackwood nodded. "I'm good with my hands. Need help. My brother-in-law was a carpenter, taught me some things." Blackwood studied her. "Why would you help?" Eleanor shrugged. "Town this size, strangers are interesting, especially ones who look like they've walked through hell." "What makes you think I have?" "Your eyes." She said simply, "I know what grief looks like. Mr. Blackwood, I buried a husband 5 years ago." He said nothing, but when he left, he nodded to her. The closest thing to friendship he had shown anyone. The peace of Shadow Creek shattered on a Tuesday. The first sign was dust on the horizon, visible from miles away in the clear desert air. Sheriff Sullivan saw it from the steps of his office, felt his stomach knot as he counted the approaching riders. 12 men on horseback rode into town shortly after noon, their arrival marked by sudden silence as townspeople hurried indoors. They moved in formation, disciplined, their leader riding slightly ahead on a massive black stallion. Silas Blackwater sat tall in the saddle, his presence commanding immediate attention. At 45, he carried himself with military bearing, his gray-streaked black hair and neatly trimmed beard, giving him an air of distinction that belied his reputation. The scar running from his left temple to jaw spoke of violence survived. The cold calculation in his dark eyes promised violence to come. Sullivan met them in the street, hand resting near his revolver. "Blackwater." "Sheriff Sullivan." Blackwater's voice was cultured, almost pleasant. "Still wearing that badge, I see. What brings you to Shadow Creek?" "Just passing through." Blackwater smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "My men are thirsty after a long ride. We'll be staying a few days." Sullivan's gaze swept over the riders. He recognized several faces from wanted posters. The Raven Gang, responsible for robberies and killings across 3 territories. Some said they'd been soldiers once before turning outlaw. "Keep the peace while you're here." Sullivan said, knowing his authority was meaningless against such numbers. Blackwater tipped his hat. "Of course, Sheriff. We're civilized men after all." The Raven Gang took over the Eagle's Nest within the hour. They didn't cause immediate trouble. They were too disciplined for that. They drank, played cards, paid for their whiskey, but their presence hung like storm clouds over the town. Eleanor watched them warily, noting their military bearing, the way they deferred to Blackwater. He held court at the central table, charming and articulate, yet something in his eyes made her skin crawl. "Ma'am," he called to her, "your establishment is a credit to this town. Might I know the name of its proprietor?" "Eleanor Hayes," she answered, approaching his table with caution. Blackwater took her hand, bowed slightly. "Silas Blackwater at your service. Your whiskey is excellent." "Thank you. Will you be staying long?" "That depends," he smiled, "on what Shadow Creek has to offer." By nightfall, the Raven Gang's true nature emerged. 2 of Blackwater's men cornered a young woman behind the general store. A third threatened the blacksmith over a perceived insult. Sullivan made no move to intervene. In the saloon, the atmosphere had turned ugly. Victor Blackwater's hulking lieutenant grabbed one of Eleanor's girls by the wrist, pulling her onto his lap. "Let her go," Eleanor said, leveling a hard stare at him. Victor sneered. "The lady and I are just getting acquainted." The girl struggled. "Please, Miss Hayes." Victor's hand tightened. "Mind your business, woman." Eleanor reached beneath the bar. "In my saloon, she is my business." The door opened, every head turned. Ethan Blackwood stood in the entrance, silhouetted against the night. He surveyed the room, taking in the scene, with one sweep of his cold blue eyes. Then he stepped inside, closing the distance to Victor's table with unhurried strides. The room fell silent. Victor released the girl, rising to his full height, a good 6 inches taller than Blackwood. "This ain't your concern, stranger," he growled. Blackwood said nothing. His eyes never left Victor's face. "You deaf?" I said. Blackwood moved with shocking speed. His right hand came up in a blur, the butt of his Colt smashing into Victor's jaw with a sickening crack. As Victor staggered, Blackwood's left hand caught the outlaw's gun arm, twisting it behind his back. Victor hit the floor, face first, Blackwood's knee driving into his spine. Two more ravens jumped to their feet. Blackwood's Colt appeared in his hand hammer, cocked, trained on the first man's chest. No one had even seen him draw. "Don't," Blackwood whispered. The menace in that single word froze them in place. From his table, Silas Blackwater watched with fascination. "Stand down," he ordered his men. Blackwood kept his gun leveled, using his free hand to disarm Victor. He leaned down, his voice barely audible. "Tell your boss the dark shadow is waiting." He straightened, backing toward the door gun, still trained on the ravens. The room remained silent until he disappeared into the night. Blackwater's expression was unreadable as he helped Victor to his feet. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting indeed." Hours later, as Eleanor closed the saloon, a soft knock came at the back door. She opened it to find Blackwood standing in the darkness. "You shouldn't have interfered," she said, letting him in. "They'll be looking for you now." I'm counting on it." His gaze swept the room. "They're staying in town. Most of them." Blackwater took a room upstairs. "The others are at the boarding house or camping outside town." She studied him. "You know them." It wasn't a question. Blackwood's face hardened. "I know what they are." "And what's that?" "Butchers. You called yourself something to Victor the Dark Shadow." Blackwood moved to the window, peering through the curtains at the empty street. "It's a name some have used." "For what?" He turned to her, his eyes haunted. "For the thing that hunts men like them." Joseph Miller couldn't sleep. The old deputy sat on his porch watching the stars, his mind troubled by the stranger who had confronted Blackwater's men. There was something familiar about him, something that nagged at the edges of memory. The sound of footsteps made him reach for his shotgun. "It's just me, Joseph," came Sheriff Sullivan's voice. Miller relaxed. "Can't sleep either." Sullivan settled into the adjacent chair. "Town's sitting on a powder keg. Blackwater's not the type to let an insult pass." "That stranger," Miller said. "The way he moved reminded me of someone." Sullivan nodded. "Military trained. I'd guess same as Blackwater's crew." Miller closed his eyes, searching his memory. "There was that massacre 3 years back. You remember small mining town up north? Whispering Pines?" Sullivan supplied. "Terrible business. Everyone killed, not everyone." Miller said, his eyes suddenly wide. "There was a survivor, a scout away on duty when it happened." He leaned forward. "Army man named Blackwood." Sullivan stared at him. "You think our stranger is the same man?" "I'm almost certain they called him the Dark Shadow. After Sayed, he hunted down the men responsible one by one." "Jesus," Sullivan whispered. "If that's true and he's here, Sunon, then Blackwater had something to do with Whispering Pines." Miller finished. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Ethan Blackwood rode into town the next morning. He tied his horse outside Doc Montgomery's office and went inside. The physician was sorting supplies. "Early for a house call." He commented, "Need to know about Blackwater's men." Blackwood said, "Who's injured? How many there are?" Doc raised an eyebrow. "Medical information is confidential." "Yara, this isn't about medicine." "Isn't it?" Doc set down the bottle he was holding. "You're planning something foolish." Blackwood's gaze hardened. "They're killers. And what are you?" A beat of silence. "Something similar." Blackwood admitted. Doc studied him, then sighed. "I treated 2 of them yesterday. Knife wound and a broken wrist. There are 12 that I've seen, plus Blackwater himself." 13. Blackwood murmured. "Unlucky number," Doc said, watching him closely. "For someone." As Blackwood turned to leave, Doc spoke again. "I've seen men consumed by vengeance before. It's a sickness same as any other." Blackwood paused at the door. "Some sicknesses can't be cured." Doc only survived. The confrontation everyone expected came that afternoon. Blackwood was loading supplies into his wagon when Victor and 3 more of Blackwater's men surrounded him. "You embarrassed me," Victor snarled, his jaw swollen and discolored. Blackwood continued securing his cargo. "You embarrassed yourself." "Mr. Blackwater wants to meet you," another said. A thin, sharp-faced man with a cavalry mustache. Suggested we bring you friendly like. Blackwood finally looked up. And if I decline, Victor drew his gun. Then we get unfriendly. Townspeople scattered, ducking into doorways and alleys. From the sheriff's office, Sullivan watched, making no move to intervene. 4 against 1. Blackwood observed quietly. Poor odds, Victor grinned. For you. For you. Blackwood corrected. His eyes scanned each man, assessing, calculating. Walk away. Tell Blackwater if he wants to talk. He knows where to find me. Victor cocked his revolver. We're done talking. Blackwood moved like a striking snake. His hand flashed to his holster, his Colt clearing leather before Victor could squeeze the trigger. The shot echoed down the street. Victor stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, his unfired gun falling to the dust. The thin man went for his weapon. Blackwood's second shot took him in the leg. The third man got his gun halfway up before Blackwood's bullet shattered his wrist. Only the fourth man managed to fire his shot, going wide as Blackwood dropped to one knee. Blackwood's return fire caught him in the thigh. 4 shots, 4 hits, in less than 3 seconds. The street fell silent, broken only by the moans of wounded men. Blackwood rose slowly, his gun still trained on the downed outlaws. I don't miss, he said softly. Remember that. A slow clapping sound broke the silence. Silas Blackwater emerged from the saloon, walking unhurriedly toward the scene. Impressive, he called, very impressive indeed. Blackwood's gun shifted targeting. Blackwater's chest. Blackwater raised his hands in mock surrender. Now, I'm unarmed. He gestured to his fallen men. You've made your point, though I notice you didn't kill them. Killing's easy, Blackwood replied. Choosing not to is harder. Blackwater smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Philosophy from a gunman. How unexpected. He stepped closer, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon aimed at his heart. We should talk, you and I, man to man. Nothing to talk about. Oh, I think there is. Blackwater's voice dropped. Ethan Blackwood, the dark shadow. The man who's been hunting my associates these past 3 years. A muscle twitched in Blackwood's jaw. Yes, I know who you are. Blackwater continued, just as I suspect you know me. I know what you did at Whispering Pines. Blackwood said, his voice barely audible. Blackwater's smile widened. Ah, so that's it. He looked around at the gathered townspeople, then back to Blackwood. We have an audience. Perhaps a more private venue for this discussion. Nothing to discuss. Osh, your wife, Blackwater said softly. Sarah wasn't it, and your boy. What was his name again? Blackwood's finger tightened on the trigger. James is James. Of course. Blackwater nodded. Fine boy. Would be what, now 8-9. You don't say their names. Blackwood whispered, his composure cracking. Ever. We really should talk. Blackwater insisted, about Whispering Pines. About why it happened. Things aren't always what they seem, Mr. Blackwood. For a long moment, the two men stood facing each other, predators recognizing their own kind. Finally, Blackwood lowered his gun slightly. Your men need a doctor, he said. Then we'll talk. Just us. Splendid. Blackwater turned to his moaning men. Gentlemen, go get patched up, Mr. Blackwood, and I have matters to discuss. As he walked away, Blackwater called over his shoulder. The Eagle's Nest at sundown. I'll buy the whiskey. Joseph Miller emerged from the crowd as Blackwater's men were helped away. The old deputy approached Blackwood, his lined face solemn. It is you, he said, the scout from Whispering Pines. Blackwood's gaze snapped to him. How do you know that name? I was a Texas Ranger for 30 years before coming here. Miller explained. We got the reports, everyone massacred, women, children, except one man who was away, a scout. The townsfolk had gathered closer, listening intently. You hunted them, didn't you? Miller continued. The men who did it, they called you. The Dark Shadow. Eleanor finished stepping forward. She looked at Blackwood with new understanding. The ghost who hunts killers. Blackwood's face was stone, but his eyes betrayed him. A flash of raw pain quickly suppressed. What happened at Whispering Pines wasn't your concern, he said flatly. What happens here isn't either. Stay out of my way. Sukkity, he turned and walked to his wagon, the crowd parting before him. As he climbed up, Eleanor called out, "They're not just here by chance, are they?" She asked. "You led them here." Blackwood paused, then looked back at the assembled townspeople. "Blackwater and his ravens killed 37 people at Whispering Pines, including my wife and son." His voice was soft but carried to every ear. "I've spent 3 years hunting them down. He's the last." "Shumpert, you used our town as bait," Sheriff Sullivan accused, stepping forward. "I used myself as bait," Blackwood corrected. "Your town was just convenient." He flicked the reins, driving away, leaving a stunned silence behind him. As the dust from Blackwood's departure settled, Silas Blackwater stood on the saloon balcony watching. A thin smile played across his scarred face. "How interesting," he murmured, "the ghost of Whispering Pines coming back to haunt me." "Shiri!" Victor limped up beside him, arm freshly bandaged. "We should kill him now. End this." Blackwater shook his head. "Not yet. First, I want to see what else he's capable of." He turned to his lieutenant. "Send word to the others. I want every man here by tomorrow night." "All of them?" Victor asked, surprised. "Every last raven," Blackwater confirmed. "If Blackwood wants a reckoning, we'll give him one. He won't survive." Night fell over Shadow Creek like a shroud. At the Eagle's Nest, Eleanor had cleared the saloon of customers, leaving only Blackwater seated at a center table. A bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses before him. The door opened. Ethan Blackwood entered, closing it behind him. He crossed to Blackwater's table, his footsteps silent on the wooden floor. "Please," Blackwater gestured to the chair opposite. "Join me." Blackwood remained standing. "Say what you have to say." Blackwater poured whiskey into both glasses. 3 years you've been hunting my men. Determined, I'll grant you that." "Not determination," Blackwood said quietly. "Promise." "Ah, yes, the vow of vengeance." Blackwater pushed a glass toward him, a powerful motivator. Blackwood ignored the offered drink, Whispering Pines. Juanita Blackwater sipped his whiskey, considering. "Would you believe me if I said it was nothing personal, just business? Slaughtering women and children isn't business. In war, civilians die. We weren't at war. Weren't we?" Blackwater leaned forward. "You were Army Scout for the 5th Cavalry, part of the unit that tracked my men after the Fort Jenkins raid. That was different." Blackwood said, "You attacked a military target, and your commanding officer, Major Williams, swore to hang us all." Blackwater's eyes hardened. "We were soldiers once, to remember, before they cast us aside. So you murdered innocent people in retaliation." A statement had to be made. Blackwater shrugged. "Besides, Whispering Pines wasn't as innocent as you think." Blackwood's hand drifted toward his holster. "Explain." "Your charming little mining town was laundering money for the Army's black operations, secret funds off the books." Blackwater smiled thinly. "Why do you think a trained scout like yourself was assigned there? You weren't protecting miners." "Blackwood, you were guarding a war chest." Blackwood's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered with doubt. "You didn't know." Blackwater realized. "They kept you in the dark. That's precious. You're lying." Ask yourself why a remote mining town warranted military protection, why your superiors insisted you maintain a cover identity." Blackwood remained silent. "We took over $100,000 from Whispering Pines." Blackwater continued, "Army funds hidden in plain sight. Your wife probably handled the transactions herself at the general store." "You're saying they died for money," Blackwood said flatly. "They died because they were part of a system that used and discarded men like us." Blackwater's voice hardened. "Men who bled for this country only to be thrown away when no longer convenient. Children died." Blackwood whispered, "My son." Regret flickered across Blackwater's face, genuine or perfectly feigned. "War has collateral damage, always has. I know why. This isn't war. This is murder. Call it what you want." Blackwater drained his glass. "But before you continue your crusade, consider this: your commanding officers knew exactly what you'd find when you returned to Whispering Pines. They knew what we'd do when we discovered the money, and they let it happen." Blackwood's fist clenched. More lies. Search your memory. Blackwood. Why send their best scout away on the very day we attacked? What were the odds? Blackwater leaned forward. They sacrificed that town, your family included. To hide their corruption, I may have pulled the trigger, but they loaded the gun. Doubt flickered in Blackwood's eyes. Join me. Blackwater offered suddenly. We were brothers in arms, once you and I. Different units, same war. We're alike more than you care to admit. We're nothing alike. No. Blackwater laughed softly. How many men have you killed these past 3 years? How many families have you left fatherless in your quest for vengeance? The line between us blurred long ago. Blackwood turned to leave. Think about what I've said. Blackwater called after him. When you're ready to hear the full truth about Whispering Pines, about who really betrayed you, come find me. Blackwood paused at the door. I already know who betrayed me. His hand rested on his gun. And I'm coming for him. Outside, Eleanor waited in the shadows. She fell into step beside Blackwood as he walked away from the saloon. What did he tell you? She asked. Lies. Blackwood answered, mixed with enough truth to make them dangerous. And what is the truth? Blackwood stopped, looked at her. The truth is that Silas Blackwater led the massacre at Whispering Pines. He murdered everyone I ever loved, and tomorrow he dies for it. Eleanor studied him in the moonlight. You didn't come to Shadow Creek by chance, did you? You knew he'd be passing through. I've been tracking him for months, and you chose our town for your showdown. Her voice hardened. Did it occur to you what might happen to us if things go wrong? I'll be gone before dawn. Blackwood said, this ends elsewhere. It's too late for that, she countered. Blackwater's already sent for reinforcements. More riders coming. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. How do you know? It's my town. I hear things. She stepped closer. You brought this fight to us, Mr. Blackwood. You owe us protection. I owe you nothing. You owe those people in Whispering Pines, she said quietly. The ones who died because you weren't there. You owe it to them not to let it happen again. The words struck him like physical blows. For a moment his mask slipped, revealing the haunted man beneath. I can't protect a whole town. You don't have to, Eleanor said. Teach us to protect ourselves. Blackwood looked away. Why would you trust me? Because I know what it's like to lose everything, she answered. And I know the look of a man searching for redemption, even if he won't admit it to himself. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. Sheriff Sullivan rode toward them, his face grim in the moonlight. Blackwood, he called. We need to talk. About what? Joseph Miller recognized one of Blackwater's new arrivals. Sullivan's voice was tight. The man who led the charge at Whispering Pines, the one they call the Butcher. Blackwood's face went rigid. Nathaniel Crane. You know him. I've been saving him for last. Blackwood said softly, right before Blackwater. Sullivan dismounted. There's more. Joseph says he was in the ranger office when the reports came in about Whispering Pines. Something doesn't add up. What do you mean? The Army sealed the investigation within hours. Wouldn't let local law enforcement near the place. Blackwood frowned. They said it was jurisdiction. Maybe. Sullivan looked doubtful. But Joseph always thought they were hiding something. Eleanor touched Blackwood's arm. Could there be truth to what Blackwater told you? Blackwood pulled away. It doesn't matter. They still die for what they did. It matters, she insisted. Truth always matters. Blackwood turned to Sullivan. How many men can you arm? You're staying, Sullivan asked, surprised. Until this is finished, Blackwood confirmed. One way or another. I've got about 15 men I trust with guns. Sullivan said maybe 10 more who could help, otherwise, not enough. Blackwood muttered, it's all we have. Eleanor said, unless you have a better idea. Blackwood looked toward his ranch in the distance, then back at Shadow Creek. For the first time since arriving, he seemed uncertain. I need to think, he said finally. Meet me at my ranch at dawn. Bring anyone willing to fight. As he walked to his horse, Sullivan called after him. Blackwater has more than 20 men now, with more coming. What chance do we have? Blackwood mounted looked down at them. The same chance Whispering Pines would have had if I'd been there. His eyes were cold in the moonlight. I won't fail twice. As Blackwood rode away, Eleanor and Sullivan exchanged glances. Think he can really help us? Sullivan asked Eleanor. Watch Blackwood's silhouette disappear into the night. I think he needs to help us as much as we need his help. She turned to the sheriff. Gather your men, I'll speak to Doc and the others. And if Blackwood's plan fails, then we die fighting, she said simply. Better than waiting to be slaughtered. Back at his ranch, Blackwood sat alone in the darkness, cleaning his gun by touch as he had countless times before. His mind replayed Blackwater's words, searching for lies, for manipulation. But doubt had taken root. Why had he been sent away that day? A routine scouting mission, nothing urgent, his commander insisting he leave immediately, even though he'd planned to attend his son's birthday celebration. The convenient timing, the Army's swift burial of the investigation, 100 small inconsistencies he'd overlooked in his grief and rage. What if Blackwater was telling the truth? Not to justify the massacre, but about the money, the corruption? What if the real betrayal went deeper than he had allowed himself to imagine? Blackwood reassembled his Colt with practiced movements. Whatever the full truth, one thing remained certain. Blackwater and his ravens had pulled the triggers. They had made their choices, and for that they would answer. As the first light of dawn touched the eastern horizon, Blackwood stepped onto his porch to see a line of riders approaching. Sullivan, Eleanor, Doc Montgomery, and about 20 men from town. His war had come to Shadow Creek, and now it was their war too. Time to become the Shadow again, he whispered to himself. Sullivan dismounted, first approaching the porch. We're here, he said simply. What's your plan? Blackwood surveyed the volunteers, shopkeepers, farmers, a few former soldiers. Not warriors, but men with something to protect. First, he said, we find out if you can shoot. Joseph Miller had remained in town watching Blackwater's men from his window. He counted 23 now, with more expected. They moved with military precision, positioning themselves throughout Shadow Creek, covering key buildings, establishing clear lines of sight, securing high ground. A soft knock at his door made him reach for his shotgun. It's just me, came a whispered voice. Doc Montgomery's boy. Miller opened the door to find 10-year-old Tommy Montgomery, the physician's son. The boy slipped inside, breathless. Pa sent me. Tommy said to tell you they're at Blackwood's ranch. Sheriff too. Training. Tommy nodded. Pa says Blackwater's men are watching the roads. Had to sneak through the creek bed to get here. Smart boy, Miller praised. You tell your pa I'm keeping count 23 now, looking for more before sundown. Yes, sir. Tommy hesitated. Is it true what they say about Mr. Blackwood, that he's a ghost hunter? Miller smiled grimly. Not exactly, but close enough. As the sun climbed higher, Blackwood assessed his makeshift militia. Some, like Sullivan, handled their weapons competently. Others could barely hit a barn at 20 paces. Eleanor proved surprisingly proficient with both rifle and revolver. My husband taught me, she explained, said a woman alone needs to protect herself. Blackwood nodded approval. You're a natural. He worked them through basic drills. How to shoot from cover, how to move without being seen, how to coordinate fire by midday. Even the weakest shots had improved. During a break, Doc Montgomery approached Blackwood. I sent Tommy to town with a message for Joseph. Thought we should know what we're facing. Good thinking, Blackwood acknowledged. My boy's clever, knows every deer trail and creek bed for miles. Blackwood studied the physician. You're not what I expected, Doc. Meaning, you handle that rifle like a soldier. Doc's expression tightened. I was 5th Medical Corps, saw enough bloodshed at Shiloh to last several lifetimes. Then you know what's coming. I do. Doc met his gaze steadily. I also know men like Blackwater served with a few, and they believe their own lies, convince themselves their atrocities are justified. Doc's eyes hardened. Whatever he told you last night was meant to shake your resolve. Don't let it. Blackwood was silent for a moment. How did you know I was doubting? It's written all over you. Doc placed a hand on his shoulder. Doubt is human. What matters is what you do despite it. After the midday meal, Blackwood revealed his strategy. Using sticks in the dirt, he sketched a rough map of the area between his ranch and town. Blackwater expects me to attack head-on, he explained. It's what I've done before, hunting his men one by one, direct confrontation. And you won't, Sullivan asked. Not this time. Blackwood traced lines around Shadow Creek. We'll use the terrain, set traps here, here, and here, create choke points, force them to fight where we choose, not where they want. Eleanor studied the map. They outnumber us. Numbers aren't everything, Blackwood countered. Blackwater's men are trained soldiers, but they're predictable military tactics. Military thinking. And what do we have? Asked one of the volunteers. A cold smile touched Blackwood's lips. Me. Throughout the afternoon they prepared. Blackwood showed them how to create deadfalls, trip wires, pit traps along the likely approach routes. The ranch itself became a fortress. Firing positions reinforced escape routes, established supplies positioned strategically. Sullivan watched with growing respect as Blackwood transformed ordinary farmers into a defensive force. Where did you learn all this? He asked. Apache scouts taught me some. Blackwood answered, the rest I figured out, hunting ravens these past 3 years. You really think we can win? Blackwood paused in his work. I think we can survive. That's not the same thing. As sunset approached, Tommy Montgomery returned slipping into the ranch like a shadow. 28 men now, he reported. Mr. Miller says they're planning something for tonight, gathering at the saloon. Tonight? Sullivan looked alarmed. We're not ready. We're as ready as we'll be. Blackwood countered, get your people into position. I need to check the northern approach. As the volunteers dispersed, Eleanor followed Blackwood. You're not telling us everything, she challenged. He continued walking. You know what you need to know. I know you're planning something beyond what you've shared. Blackwood stopped, turned to her. Blackwater wants me. If I give him what he wants, it might save lives. You're going to surrender, she asked incredulously. No, his eyes were cold. I'm going to hunt. Understanding dawned on her face. You're going into town alone. It's what I do best. It's suicide, she argued. Even the Dark Shadow can't take on 28 men. I don't need to take them all. Blackwood checked his Colt. Just thin their ranks, create confusion. And if you're killed, then Sullivan leads the defense here. Eleanor stepped closer, her expression fierce. There's something you should know. She hesitated, then continued. My full name is Eleanor Hayes Blackwood. Blackwood stared at her. What? Sarah was my sister, she said softly. Your wife was my sister. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He took a step back, searching her face for confirmation, for the family resemblance he'd somehow missed. That's not possible. We were estranged, she explained. Hadn't spoken in years. I didn't know about Whispering Pines until after. By then you'd already disappeared. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have stayed if I had? She met his gaze. Or would you have run afraid I'd try to stop your vendetta? Blackwood's expression hardened. This changes nothing. It changes everything, she insisted. You're not alone in this, Ethan. You never were. For a moment the mask cracked, raw emotion flooded his eyes, grief, rage, confusion. I have to finish this, he whispered. I know, she said, but not alone, not anymore. Before he could respond, Sullivan's shout broke the moment. Riders coming from town. Blackwood drew his gun, moving instantly toward the sound. Eleanor followed, her own weapon ready. They reached the front porch as a single horseman appeared on the road from Shadow Creek. He rode slowly, hands visible, no weapon drawn. That's Jacob Wells. Sullivan identified him. Runs the telegraph office. Wells reined in his horse at the edge of the property. Message from town. He called for Blackwood. Speak your piece. Blackwood called back. Blackwater says to tell you he has Joseph Miller. Says if you want him alive, come to the saloon alone. Wells shifted uncomfortably. Says he's tired of waiting for you to make your move. Sullivan cursed. Joseph stayed to watch them, and they caught him watching. Blackwood finished. It's a trap, Eleanor warned. Of course it is. Blackwood's voice was ice. But Miller doesn't deserve to die for my war. So we all go, Sullivan suggested, full force. No. Blackwood's decision was instant. If we all go, Blackwater will have his men torch the town. He's not bluffing. And if you go alone, then I give him what he wants. Blackwood checked his gun. Me, Eleanor grabbed his arm. Ethan, don't do this. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing Sarah's eyes in her face for the first time. Take care of these people, he said softly. If I don't come back. Without waiting for a response, he strode to his horse mounted and rode toward Wells. Tell Blackwater I'm coming, he called to the telegraph operator. Tell him to keep Miller alive if he wants to see me. As Blackwood rode away, Eleanor turned to Sullivan. Get everyone ready, she ordered. We're following him. But he said, I don't care what he said. She cut him off. He's family, and family doesn't let family die alone. The sun had set by the time Blackwood reached the outskirts of Shadow Creek. The town lay quiet, streets empty, an unnatural stillness hanging over it. Oil lamps burned in windows, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. He left his horse at the livery stable, proceeded on foot, moving silently from shadow to shadow. His senses, honed by years of tracking, registered every detail. Fresh boot prints in the dirt, the metallic click of a gun being cocked, the whisper of fabric as a man shifted position. They were waiting for him, watching. He counted 3 sentries before reaching Main Street. None saw him pass. The Eagle's Nest blazed with light, the only building showing signs of activity. Through the windows, Blackwood could see figures moving inside. In the center, tied to a chair, sat Joseph Miller. The old deputy's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but he was alive. Blackwater stood nearby, watching the door, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Blackwood assessed the situation, calculating odds, planning his approach. He could enter through the back, use the element of surprise, but that risked Miller's life immediately. No, for this he would need to walk through the front door. He removed his gun belt, hiding it beneath a water trough. Then he took a small derringer from his boot, tucking it inside his sleeve. A knife went into his belt at the small of his back, concealed by his coat. Thus armed, he stepped into the street, walking openly toward the saloon. Inside, one of Blackwater's men noticed him first. He's here, conversation ceased. All eyes turned to the bat-wing doors as Blackwood pushed them open and stepped inside. The saloon was packed with ravens. At least 15 men, all armed, positioned strategically around the room. Blackwater stood at the center, a thin smile playing across his scarred face. Ah, Mr. Blackwood, he greeted, right on time. Blackwood's gaze went to Miller. Let him go. He's not part of this. All in good time. Blackwater gestured to a chair opposite Miller. Please join us. I don't see a need to prolong this, Blackwood said quietly. It's me you want. Indeed. Blackwater sipped his whiskey. But first a conversation. I believe we left some matters unresolved last night. 2 ravens moved forward, frisking Blackwood roughly. They found the knife but missed the derringer. He's clean, one reported, tossing the blade onto a table. Please sit. Blackwater insisted. Blackwood complied, taking the indicated chair. I must say I expected more resistance. Blackwater commented, the famed dark shadow walking in unarmed. He studied Blackwood. Unless this is part of some elaborate plan. No plan. Blackwood said, just an end. Miller, barely conscious, raised his head. Don't do this, he mumbled through split lips. Touching. Blackwater mocked. He's worried about you despite his own predicament. Blackwood's gaze never left Blackwater. What do you want to conclude our business? Blackwater set down his glass. I offered you a choice last night. Join me or die like the others. There was never a choice. No, even after what I told you about Whispering Pines, about who really betrayed you. Blackwood's expression remained impassive. Words don't unkill the dead. True enough. Blackwater nodded to a man standing near the bar, a tall, brutish figure with a face like weathered stone. You recognize Nathaniel Crane, I believe the butcher of Whispering Pines. Crane stepped forward, his cold eyes fixed on Blackwood. Been looking forward to meeting you again. He growled, proper like this time. Blackwood's gaze shifted to Crane. Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of raw hatred quickly suppressed. "He remembers you fondly," Blackwater continued, "especially your wife. Says she begged prettily at the end." Crane smirked. "The boy too." For an instant, Blackwood's control slipped, his hands clenched, his breath catching. Then the mask returned, his eyes going cold and dead. "That's what I wanted to see," Blackwater said softly. "That spark, that hatred." He leaned forward. "Now imagine directing it at those who truly deserve it." "I am," Blackwood replied. "Not just us." Blackwater's voice dropped. "The men who sent you away that day, the officers who buried the investigation, the system that sacrificed your family for its secrets." Miller stirred in his chair. "Don't listen." He slurred. "He's lying." "Am I?" Blackwater produced a folded paper from his coat. "This came from Army intelligence orders to secure a special asset from Whispering Pines, the day after the massacre signed by Major Williams himself." He slid the paper across the table. Blackwood didn't touch it. "I have more," Blackwater continued. "Account books, transfer orders, evidence of what was really happening in that town." He stared intently at Blackwood. "Your family died for dirty money, Blackwood. Army money being laundered through that mining operation. And you took it," Blackwood said flatly. "We liberated it." Blackwater corrected, "From the same government that used us both." Outside, unseen by those in the saloon, shadowy figures moved into position. Eleanor Sullivan, Doc, and the volunteers from the ranch spread out around town, taking cover behind buildings on rooftops and alleys. Tommy Montgomery slipped between them, carrying messages coordinating their movements. Inside, Blackwater rose from his seat, circling the table to stand behind Blackwood. "Last chance," he said, placing a hand on Blackwood's shoulder. "Join us, help us fight the real enemy." "And Miller?" Blackwood asked, a show of good faith. Blackwater nodded to one of his men. "Cut him loose." The Raven moved to Miller, slicing his bonds. The old deputy slumped forward, barely able to stay upright. "Let him go," Blackwood said. "Then we'll talk." "Of course." Blackwater signaled two men who lifted Miller between them, half carrying him toward the door. As they moved past Blackwood, Miller's bloody lips formed words only Blackwood could see. "It's a trap." "I know," Blackwood murmured. Miller was taken outside, deposited unceremoniously in the street. Blackwater returned to his seat. "Now your decision." Blackwood's eyes tracked Miller through the window, watching as Doc Montgomery emerged from the shadows to pull the deputy to safety. "You still haven't told me what you want," Blackwood said, returning his attention to Blackwater. "Alliance partnership." Blackwater spread his hands. "The Ravens need a man like you." "For what purpose?" "We're building something in Mexico, a place for men like us, soldiers without a country, with your skills, your reputation." "My reputation is built on killing men like you. Men you thought deserved killing," Blackwater countered. "But what if you were wrong? What if your vengeance was misdirected?" Blackwood was silent for a long moment. "Then show me your evidence." "All of it." Hope flickered in Blackwater's eyes. "You'll consider it. I'll hear you out." Blackwater smiled triumphant. "Crane, bring the papers from my room." The butcher scowled but moved toward the stairs. "And Blackwood's gun." Blackwater added, "as a gesture of trust." Crane disappeared upstairs. Blackwater turned back to Blackwood. "You won't regret this. Together we'll want us." "You talk too much," Blackwood interrupted. Before Blackwater could respond, Blackwood's hand moved in a blur. The concealed derringer appeared, aimed at Blackwater's heart, but he didn't fire. Instead, he placed the small gun on the table between them. "What's this?" Blackwater asked, confused. "A choice." Blackwood said, "The same one you never gave my wife and son." Outside, hearing the signal they'd arranged, Miller's safe extraction, Eleanor raised her rifle. Now, she called. Gunfire erupted throughout Shadow Creek, a coordinated volley targeting the Ravens positioned outside the saloon. Several fell immediately, others scrambled for cover, returning fire blindly into the darkness. Inside, the sound of shooting galvanized Blackwater's men. They rushed to windows, to doors trying to assess the threat. In the moment of confusion, Blackwood lunged across the table, seizing Blackwater by the throat, driving him backwards out of his chair. They crashed to the floor, Blackwood's weight pinning the outlaw leader. What the... Blackwater choked. 3 years. Blackwood snarled into his face. 3 years I've hunted you. Did you really think I'd join you? Understanding dawned in Blackwater's eyes. The town, they're with you. They've been with me from the beginning. Blackwood lied. Ravens rushed to aid their leader, but gunfire from the street intensified, keeping them pinned down. Through the windows, they could see their comrades falling. Kill him! Blackwater shouted. A raven raised his gun, aiming at Blackwood's back. Before he could fire, the window behind him shattered. Eleanor's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Blackwood used the distraction to drag Blackwater up, using him as a shield. The derringer now pressed to his temple. Order them to surrender. Blackwood demanded. Go to hell. Blackwater spat. Already been there. Blackwood whispered, You sent me, remember. On the street, the battle raged. Sullivan and his volunteers, though outnumbered, had the advantage of surprise in defensive positions. Doc Montgomery moved among them, treating the wounded Tommy at his side, delivering fresh ammunition and messages. Inside the saloon, Blackwood backed toward the door, still using Blackwater as a shield. Your men are dying out there, he told the outlaw leader, for nothing. They knew the risks. Did they know you'd sacrifice them so easily? Doubt flickered across the faces of the nearest ravens. From upstairs came a sudden commotion. Nathaniel Crane appeared at the top of the stairs, Blackwood's gun belt in hand. Ambush, he roared, seeing the situation below. He raised a rifle, taking aim at Blackwood. Blackwood fired the derringer. The tiny gun's range was limited, the shot going wide, but it forced Crane to duck back. It's over, Blackwater. Blackwood said, Call them off. For a moment it seemed Blackwater might comply. Then a cruel smile spread across his face. Now, Crane, he shouted. The butcher lobbed something from the top of the stairs, a small metal canister that hit the floor with a clank and began hissing. White smoke poured out rapidly, filling the room. Gas, someone shouted. Confusion erupted. Ravens fired blindly in panic. Blackwood, momentarily distracted, loosened his grip on Blackwater. The outlaw leader drove an elbow into Blackwood's ribs, breaking free. The smoke grew thicker, burning eyes and throats. Men stumbled, coughing, fighting to reach doors and windows. Through the chaos, Blackwood caught glimpses of movement. Blackwater escaping toward the back. Crane following, covering his retreat. Blackwood fought his way through the smoke, gasping for breath, his eyes watered, vision blurring. He reached the rear door just in time to see shadowy figures disappearing into an alley. Outside, the battle had spread throughout town. Ravens, caught between Sullivan's forces and their own confusion, began to surrender or flee. Eleanor, seeing the smoke pouring from the saloon, ran toward it. Ethan, she called. Blackwood emerged, coughing violently. Blackwater? He gasped. He's escaping with Crane. Awane, you're hurt, she said, noticing blood on his shirt. Doesn't matter. He staggered toward the alley. Can't let them get away. Eleanor caught his arm. You can barely stand. 3 years, he rasped. Can't fail now. From down the street came Sullivan's voice. They're running. The Ravens are breaking. Blackwood pulled free from Eleanor's grasp. Blackwater won't abandon his men completely. He'll regroup somewhere close. The old mining camp, Eleanor suggested, in the foothills abandoned. Years ago. Blackwood nodded. Round up anyone who can still fight. Follow me there. He looked at her intently. But give me time first. Time for what? To become the ghost again. Before she could argue, he disappeared into the darkness. The battle for Shadow Creek ended as suddenly as it had begun. Of Blackwater's 28 men, 6 were dead, 9 wounded and captured, the rest scattered. Sullivan's volunteers had suffered too. 3 men killed, several injured, though none critically, thanks to Doc Montgomery's swift attention. Where's Blackwood? Sullivan asked, finding Eleanor supervising the securing of prisoners. Gone after Blackwater? She answered, to the old Carson mining camp. Sullivan cursed alone. That's suicide. Not for him. She said, not for the dark shadow. We should follow. Sullivan insisted, finish this together. Eleanor shook her head. We will, but not yet. She looked toward the distant foothills, barely visible in the moonlight. He needs to do this his way first. Miles away in the abandoned mining camp, Silas Blackwater paced the floor of a dilapidated office building. 8 of his men had made it there, the most loyal or simply the most afraid to desert Nathaniel. Crane stood guard at the window, rifle ready. He'll come, Crane said, confidence in his voice. The fool can't help himself. Of course he'll come. Blackwater snapped. The question is, will he come alone? Does it matter he's one man who's hunted down 20 of our brothers? Blackwater reminded him, one man who just turned a town of farmers into an army. Crane spat on the floor. Set traps, position men. When he comes, we'll be ready. We were ready in town. Blackwater countered. Look how that ended. This time, we know he's coming. Or, we've always known he was coming. Blackwater said softly. For 3 years, outside the night was alive with sounds. The whisper of wind through abandoned buildings, the creak of rotting timber, the scurry of nocturnal creatures, and now other sounds. A pebble dislodged a boot-scraping rock, a breath held too long. The dark shadow had arrived inside the office. One of the ravens tensed. Did you hear that? Hear what? Crane demanded. Outside, something moving. Crane strained to listen. Nothing, just nerves. But Blackwater knew better. He's here, he said quietly. Watching, planning. Impossible. Crane scoffed. We've been here less than an hour. He tracked us from the Dakotas to Texas. Blackwater reminded him, you think a few miles of desert would slow him down? In the darkness outside, Ethan Blackwood circled the mining camp like a wolf. His injury burned with each movement, but he pushed the pain aside, focusing on the task at hand. He counted men, noted positions, identified weaknesses. 8 ravens plus Blackwater, 2 guarding the perimeter, 1 watching from the roof of the mill building, the rest inside the office with their leader. In his mind, he mapped his approach, the guards first silently, then the lookout. By the time he reached Blackwater, doubt and fear would be doing half his work for him. This was his element. This was what the past 3 years had trained him for. In darkness, he was more ghost than man. The first guard died without a sound, Blackwood's knife across his throat. The second had time for only a startled gasp before joining his comrade in eternity. Inside the office, Blackwater's unease grew. Check the perimeter. He ordered 2 more men, and stay together. They left reluctantly, guns drawn, eyes wide in the darkness. On the roof of the mill, the lookout saw movement, a shadow detaching from shadows. He raised his rifle only to feel cold steel against the back of his neck. Make a sound, Blackwood whispered, and it's your last. The man froze, terror holding him motionless. How many with Blackwater? Blackwood demanded, 4. The lookout stammered, plus Crane. And their plan, wait for you, kill you when you come. Blackwood nodded, good plan. The knife moved once precisely. The lookout slumped forward unconscious, but alive blood flowing from a shallow cut. Shame it won't work. The 2 men Blackwater had sent to check the perimeter moved nervously through the abandoned camp mining equipment, cast bizarre shadows in the moonlight, every shape potentially hiding death. This is insane, one muttered. We should have kept riding south. Shut up, the other hissed. He'll hear you. Who one man against all of us? Not a man, a ghost. There's no such thing as... He never finished the sentence. Something dropped from above, a dark shape plummeting from a ruined head frame. Both men fired wildly, their shots going high. The shape hit the ground behind them. They spun, firing again at empty air. Where is he? One gasped. Everywhere, came Blackwood's whisper, impossibly close. A gunshot echoed. One man fell, clutching his leg. The other fired blindly into darkness, then turned to run. He made it 3 steps before Blackwood materialized in his path. Colt leveled at his chest. "Drop it," Blackwood ordered. The Raven complied, his gun hitting the dirt. "Tell me about the money," Blackwood said from Whispering Pines. What? The money. Blackwater took Army funds. Is it true?" The man nodded frantically. Yes, over 100,000. Blackwater said it was a secret war chest. And the evidence he mentioned, documents proving Army involvement. Real. Blackwater kept everything for protection, he said. Blackwood's expression didn't change. Where? In his saddlebags, always keeps them close. Blackwood considered this, then gestured with his gun. "Go run, don't stop until sunrise." The Raven didn't need to be told twice. He bolted, disappearing into the night. Inside the office, tension had reached a breaking point. No word from the perimeter guards, no sign of the lookout, just silence broken occasionally by distant gunshots. "He's picking us off," one man said, panic edging his voice. "Like he did the others." "Shut up," Crane snapped. "He's trying to scare us." "It's working," another muttered. Blackwater stood at the window, peering into darkness. "We stay together," he decided. "No one leaves this room." "And do what?" Crane demanded. "Wait for him to come to us?" "Exactly." Blackwater smiled thinly. "Because this time we'll be ready. We should make a run for it," a younger Raven suggested. "The horses are still. He'll pick you off before you reach them." Blackwater cut him off. "Then what's your plan?" Blackwater drew his gun. "We wait, and when he comes, we kill him." "And if he doesn't come?" Crane asked. "Oh, he'll come," Blackwater assured him. "He has to. This ends tonight one way or another." As if on cue, a voice called from outside. Blackwood's voice, though it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Blackwater. The men tensed, guns raised. "I know about the money," Blackwood continued. "I know about the Army's involvement." Blackwater's eyes narrowed. And it changes nothing," came the reply. "You still murdered innocent children, my son, for necessary reasons." Blackwater called back, "In a war you didn't know you were fighting. No war justifies what you did. The government you served thought differently. Ask yourself who the real villains are." Silence fell. The Ravens exchanged nervous glances, wondering if Blackwood had gone, wondering where he would appear next. Then unexpectedly the front door opened. Blackwood stood framed in the doorway, his gun-holstered hands empty at his sides. "Jesus!" one of the Ravens whispered. Blackwater recovered first. "Bold move," he commented, his own gun trained on Blackwood's chest. "But stupid? Not necessarily," Blackwood replied. "I've been thinking about your offer." Suspicion clouded Blackwater's features. "My offer to join us. To pursue those truly responsible," Blackwood clarified. "The men behind the money. The officers who knew what would happen." Hope flickered in Blackwater's eyes. "You believe me." "I believe there's more to the story than I knew," Blackwood admitted. "I want to see your evidence." "All of it?" Crane shook his head violently. "It's a trick." "Is it?" Blackwater studied. Blackwood intently. "Why come in unarmed? Why not just kill us from the shadows?" "Because vengeance hasn't brought me peace," Blackwood said, his voice hollow. 3 years hunting, killing, and for what? My family is still dead. Nothing changes that, but justice might bring closure? Blackwater suggested real justice against those who sacrificed them. Blackwood nodded slowly. "Show me the proof." Crane raised his rifle. "Boss, don't." "Stand down," Blackwater ordered. He holstered his gun, moved to a saddlebag lying nearby. "It's all here. Everything we took from the Army's regional office after Whispering Pines." He withdrew a packet of papers, holding them up. Transfer orders, account ledgers. Evidence of a slush fund running through that mining town. Money for operations Congress never approved. Blackwood took a step forward. "And my family, they knew about this. Your wife ran the general store." Blackwater explained. "Where the transactions happened, she must have suspected something." He handed the papers to Blackwood. "See for yourself." Blackwood accepted the packet, began rifling through documents. His expression remained unreadable. There, Blackwater pointed. Orders signed by Major Williams himself, the day before the massacre. Ordering what? The immediate transport of funds from Whispering Pines to Fort Laramie, specifically ordering you to escort the shipment. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Oh, why me? Because you were the only one they thought they could trust. Blackwater said, the only one who might not ask questions? Blackwood continued, reading, his face hardening. And this? He held up another paper. Report from Army Intelligence. Dated 3 days before the massacre, warning that our gang was in the area, likely targeting the money. They knew, Blackwood murmured. They knew, and they did nothing. Worse than nothing. Blackwater pressed. They sent you away. Deliberately left the town undefended. Why? To clean up a loose end. The operation was being shut down. Too many questions from territorial officials. Blackwater took a step closer. They sacrificed that town, your family included, to bury their corruption. Crane watched nervously, his rifle still half raised. The other ravens remained tense, unsure where this was leading. Blackwood looked up from the papers, his eyes cold. And this justifies what you did. We were soldiers once. Blackwater said simply, following orders, fighting enemies, watching our brothers die. Then they discarded us, branded us criminals for doing exactly what they trained us to do. His voice hardened. So yes, we took their money, we sent a message in blood, and I'd do it again. Even the children. Blackwater hesitated. War has casualties. Not casualties. Blackwood corrected, victims. The moment stretched, tension building. Then Blackwood carefully refolded the papers, tucking them inside his coat. Thank you, he said quietly, for the truth. So you understand now. Blackwater pressed. Why you should join us together, we can make them pay. The officers, the politicians, all of them. I understand perfectly, Blackwood replied. Without warning, he drew his gun, not from his empty holster, but from behind his back, where it had been concealed beneath his coat. What Blackwater began. The truth doesn't justify butchery, Blackwood said, his voice deadly calm. But it does complete my hunt. Crane fired first, his shot going wide. As Blackwood ducked, the room erupted in chaos. Ravens diving for cover guns, blazing wood splintering as bullets tore through the decrepit office. Blackwood rolled behind an overturned desk, returning fire with precision. 2 ravens fell in the first exchange. A third staggered back wounded. Blackwater took cover behind a filing cabinet, shouting orders that went unheard in the din. Crane, moving to flank Blackwood, caught a bullet in the shoulder but kept advancing. Kill him, Blackwater roared. Kill him now. The firefight intensified. Blackwood, outgunned and outnumbered, fought with the calm efficiency that had made him legend. Each shot deliberate, each movement calculated. But he was trapped, pinned down, his position deteriorating with each passing second. A bullet grazed his temple, another tore through his side. Blood soaked his shirt, pain clouding his vision. Still he fought on. Outside, the sound of gunfire brought Eleanor and Sullivan's force to a halt. They had followed Blackwood's trail to the mining camp, arriving just as the battle inside the office building reached its crescendo. That's our cue, Sullivan said grimly. Eleanor nodded. Remember, Blackwater and Crane belong to Ethan. The rest are yours. They advanced their group, spreading out to surround the building. Doc Montgomery set up a medical station behind a ruined ore cart, preparing for casualties. Inside, Blackwood's situation had become desperate. Down to his last few bullets, bleeding from multiple wounds, he knew his time was running short. But one thought sustained him. Blackwater was within reach, so close to ending what began 3 years ago. You can't win this. Blackwater called from his position. Even if you kill me, the truth dies with me. Sorn. Some truths need to die. Blackwood answered, his voice steady, despite his wounds. Crane, blood streaming from his shoulder, had worked his way around to Blackwood's flank. With a savage roar, he charged, firing as he came. Blackwood pivoted, returning fire. His bullet caught Crane in the chest, staggering him, but the big man's momentum carried him forward. He crashed into Blackwood, sending them both sprawling. They struggled on the floor. Blackwood's gun knocked away Crane's massive hands, closing around his throat. "Remember me?" Crane snarled, his face inches from Blackwood's. "I'm the one who made your wife scream. I'm the one who made your boy beg." Blackwood's vision began to darken, his strength fading. Then his fingers found something. The knife Crane wore at his belt. With the last of his energy, he wrenched it free and drove it upward, beneath Crane's ribs. The butcher's eyes widened in shock. His grip loosened. Blackwood twisted the knife, pushed deeper. "I remember," he whispered, "and so will you in hell." Crane collapsed, blood bubbling from his lips. His last breath escaped in a rattling gasp. From across the room, Blackwater watched in horror as his lieutenant died. His remaining men, seeing the seemingly unstoppable butcher fall, began to falter. "Hold your ground," Blackwater shouted, desperation in his voice. Outside, Sullivan's men had reached the building. On Eleanor's signal, they opened fire through windows and doorways, catching the Ravens in a devastating crossfire. Blackwater, seeing his position collapsing, made his decision. He bolted for a side door, firing blindly behind him. Blackwood, rising unsteadily to his feet, saw his quarry escaping. Ignoring his wounds, ignoring Sullivan's men, now pouring into the room, he gave chase. "Ethan," Eleanor called, entering, just in time to see him stagger through the door after Blackwater. Outside, Blackwater ran through the maze of abandoned mining structures, heading for the stables where horses waited. Behind him, Blackwood followed each step, in agony, blood marking his trail. The night was alive with gunfire as Sullivan's posse mopped up the remaining Ravens. But for Blackwood, only one target mattered. Blackwater reached the stable, fumbling with the door, glancing over his shoulder. He could just make out Blackwood's silhouette approaching through the darkness. "It's over, Blackwater." Blackwood called, his voice eerily calm, despite his labored breathing. "It's never over," Blackwater replied, backing into the stable. "Men like us, we don't get endings. Just new wars to fight." "Not this time." Blackwood advanced steadily. "This war ends here." Moonlight streamed through gaps in the stable roof, creating patches of silver amid the gloom. Blackwater disappeared into shadow, his voice echoing. "What then, Blackwood? What happens when I'm gone? What purpose will drive the great dark shadow?" Then Blackwood moved deeper into the stable, alert for ambush. "I'll find a way to live with the ghosts." "Will you?" Blackwater's voice seemed to come from everywhere. "Or will you become one yourself? A man who's seen too much death to ever truly live again." Blackwood paused, listening intently. The creak of a floorboard to his left. He turned just as Blackwater lunged from darkness. Gun blazing, the bullet caught Blackwood high in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell against a stall door, pain lancing through him. Blackwater advanced, his scarred face triumphant. "So falls the legend." He mocked, raising his gun for the killing shot. A rifle cracked from the stable entrance. Blackwater staggered, blood blossoming on his thigh. He turned to see Eleanor Hayes in the doorway, smoke rising from her rifle barrel. "Not today," she said. Blackwater fired at her, the shot going wide. She ducked back outside as wood splintered where her head had been. The distraction was all Blackwood needed. He surged forward, tackling Blackwater at the waist. Both men crashed to the ground, Blackwater's gun skittering across the floorboards. They grappled in the dirt and hay, all finesse forgotten, reduced to primal survival. Blackwood's greater skill against Blackwater's desperate strength. "You don't understand," Blackwater gasped as they struggled. "I was following orders too, just like you always did." "Whose orders?" Blackwood demanded, pinning him momentarily. "Higher than you can imagine." Blackwater broke the hold, delivered a savage blow to Blackwood's wounded side. "Men who play at war like it's a game of chess." Blackwood reeled from the pain but countered with an elbow strike that shattered Blackwater's nose. "Names," he growled. "Kill me and you'll never know." Blackwater taunted, blood streaming down his face. They separated, both men gasping for breath, circling each other in the moonlight. Blackwater had drawn a knife, the same blade taken from Blackwood at the saloon. "All this," Blackwater gestured around them. "All the death, the pain, it goes beyond me, beyond you." I don't care," Blackwood said softly. "You killed my family. That's all that matters." And when I'm dead, what then? The emptiness returns. The ghosts grow louder. Blackwater smiled through bloodied teeth. You've been dead since Whispering Pines, Blackwood. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Maybe so. Blackwood's eyes never left the knife. But I made a promise. Blackwater lunged blades, slashing toward Blackwood's throat. Blackwood parried with his forearm, accepting a cut to deflect the killing strike. He countered with a savage blow to Blackwater's wounded leg. The outlaw leader howled in pain, but recovered quickly, backing Blackwood against a stall. The knife flashed again, opening a gash across Blackwood's chest. See? Blackwater panted. You bleed like any man. So do you, Blackwood replied. With shocking speed, he drove forward inside Blackwater's guard. His hand locked around the outlaw's knife wrist, his other palm smashing into Blackwater's elbow. The joint broke with an audible crack. Blackwater screamed, the knife falling from nerveless fingers. Blackwood caught it before it hit the ground, reversed his grip, and drove the blade into Blackwater's chest. Time seemed to stop. The two men stood frozen faces, inches apart, connected by the knife between them. For Sarah, Blackwood whispered. For James, for everyone at Whispering Pines. Shakadi. Blackwater's eyes widened, not in pain or fear, but in strange acceptance. It won't bring them back, he gasped. It won't bring you peace. I know, Blackwood acknowledged, but it's justice, the only kind this world has left. Blackwater clutched at Blackwood's shirt, blood bubbling from his lips. The papers? He choked. Read them all. The truth bigger than both of us. His grip slackened, his eyes glazed. With a final shuddering breath, Silas Blackwater, the last survivor of the Whispering Pines massacre besides Blackwood himself, slid to the stable floor. Blackwood stood over him, knife still in hand, blood dripping from multiple wounds. 3 years of single-minded purpose completed in this decrepit stable, his sworn quest fulfilled, and in its place, emptiness. He staggered, suddenly aware of his injuries, the blood loss, the exhaustion of body and soul. As darkness crept in from the edges of his vision, he heard Eleanor's voice, felt her arms supporting him. Ethan, stay with me. He tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The world tilted, went dark, and the dark shadow fell into oblivion. His hunt finally ended. Ethan Blackwood dreamed of fire, of Whispering Pines burning, of Sarah's face contorted in terror, of James calling for a father who wasn't there. He dreamed of the long hunt that followed, of men dying by his hand, of becoming the very darkness he sought to eliminate. And through it all, Blackwater's final words echoed, "It won't bring you peace." He woke with a gasp, trying to sit up, only to be forced back by searing pain. "Easy," came Doc Montgomery's steady voice. "You'll tear your stitches." Blackwood blinked, his vision clearing slowly. He lay in an unfamiliar bed, bandages wrapped tight around his torso, more at his shoulder and head. Sunlight streamed through a window, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. "Where am I?" he rasped, his throat parched. "My house," Doc answered, lifting a glass of water to Blackwood's lips. "You've been my guest for 3 days now." Blackwood drank gratefully. 3 days. You nearly died. Doc said matter-of-factly, "Lost enough blood for 2 men. Eleanor wouldn't leave your side until this morning, when I insisted she get some rest." Memory returned in a rush. Blackwater. Dead, Doc confirmed. Along with Crane and most of their men, Sullivan has the survivors locked up awaiting the territorial marshal. Blackwood closed his eyes, letting the news settle over him. "It's done then. Your hunt, yes." Doc studied him. "Question is what happens to the hunter now that the prey is gone." Blackwood had no answer. Over the following days, as strength gradually returned, Blackwood found himself adrift in unfamiliar waters. For 3 years, vengeance had defined his existence, shaped every decision, justified every action. Without it, he felt hollow, purposeless. Eleanor visited daily, bringing meals, news of the town's recovery quiet company. She never pressed him about the future, seeming to understand his need for silence. On the 7th day, when Blackwood was strong enough to sit in a chair by the window, she brought the papers taken from Blackwater. You should read these, she said, placing the packet on the table beside him. Whatever else he was, Blackwater believed they were important. Blackwood stared at the documents but made no move to touch them. Some truths are better left buried. You don't believe that, she challenged. The man who hunted killers across 3 territories doesn't fear truth. His eyes met hers, so like Sarah's yet different, harder perhaps. More knowing. What if Blackwater was right? He asked quietly. What if there were others involved? Men I can't touch, can't punish. Then you live with that knowledge, she said simply, as we all live with our unfinished business. After she left, Blackwood sat for hours staring at the packet. Finally, as the sun set, he reached for the papers and began to read. What he found confirmed his worst fears. The operation at Whispering Pines had indeed been a cover for Army intelligence, laundering funds for unsanctioned operations against both hostile Indian tribes and civilian targets suspected of aiding them. His commanding officer, Major Williams, had known of Blackwater's approach and deliberately sent Blackwood away, not to protect him, but to ensure no military resistance when the Raven struck. Most damning of all, a coded telegram sent after the massacre. Site cleared, asset recovered, no witnesses. His family, his friends, his whole community, sacrificed to protect corrupt officials and their secret war chest. When Doc Montgomery checked on him that evening, he found Blackwood sitting motionless, the papers scattered around him, his face carved from stone. Bad news, Doc asked gently. The darkest kind, Blackwood replied. The kind that changes everything. Doc poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to Blackwood. Sometimes the hardest wounds to heal are the ones we can't see. Blackwood accepted the drink. These wounds don't heal, Doc. They just get buried deeper. Only if you let them. Doak settled into the adjacent chair. Take it from a man who's seen his share of battlefields. Living in the past is its own kind of death. Blackwood said nothing, but the words found purchase in his battered soul. The next morning, Sheriff Sullivan visited, bringing Blackwood's recovered weapons. The Colt Walker cleaned and oiled, and the knife taken from Crane. Town's talking about you, Sullivan said, placing the items on the bed. The dark shadow, the man who saved Shadow Creek. I didn't come here to save anyone. Blackwood reminded him, maybe not. Sullivan conceded, but that's what happened all the same. He hesitated, then continued, I'm getting old, Blackwood. This badge gets heavier every year. He tapped the star on his chest. Been thinking about finding a replacement. Blackwood understood immediately. Not interested. Didn't ask yet. Sullivan countered, but a man with your skills, your sense of justice. My sense of vengeance. Blackwood corrected, there's a difference. Is there? Sullivan studied him. Way I see it, you spent 3 years punishing the wicked. Sounds like a lawman's job to me. I've killed too many men to wear that star. And I've compromised too many times. Sullivan's gaze was steady. Maybe what this town needs is a man who won't bend when trouble comes calling. Blackwood shook his head. You're looking at the wrong man, Sheriff. Maybe, Sullivan conceded, rising to leave. Or maybe you're the only man left who fits the bill. That afternoon, against Doc's orders, Blackwood dressed and walked slowly to the Eagle's Nest. The town was alive with activity. Buildings being repaired, normal commerce resumed, life continuing. Several people nodded to him as he passed, no longer viewing him with suspicion, but something closer to respect. The saloon was empty save for Eleanor, who looked up in surprise as he entered. You shouldn't be out of bed, she scolded, but her eyes showed relief at seeing him up. Needed to move, he explained, easing himself onto a bar stool. Needed to think. She poured him a small whiskey without asking. And what have you been thinking about, Mr. Blackwood? The future, he admitted, something I haven't considered in 3 years, and I don't know what mine looks like. He studied the amber liquid in his glass. For so long there was only the hunt. Now you have choices, she finished. That's what freedom is. Terrifying, isn't it? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Worse than facing Blackwater. Sullivan offered you his job, she stated, not a question. News travels fast. Small town. She wiped the bar with a cloth. You should take it. Blackwood looked at her sharply. You don't know what I've done, the men I've killed. I know exactly what you've done. She contradicted, and why you did it. The question is whether you can do something different now. Her eyes held his. Whether you can protect instead of avenge. I'm not sure I remember how. Then relearn, she said simply. Start with Shadow Creek. Before he could respond, the saloon doors opened. Tommy Montgomery rushed in, his young face flushed with excitement. Mr. Blackwood, he called. Pa said you'd be here. There's riders coming from the east. Blackwood tensed immediately. Raiders. No, sir. Army men, a whole patrol. Eleanor and Blackwood exchanged concerned glances. The papers? The evidence of corruption. Had someone come to bury the truth again? Where's your father? Blackwood asked, rising despite the pain. At his office, said to fetch you quick. Go find Sheriff Sullivan. Blackwood told the boy, tell him to meet us at docks. As Tommy ran out, Eleanor moved to Blackwood's side. You think they're here for the documents? There's only one way to find out. They reached Doc Montgomery's house just as a patrol of 8 cavalry soldiers rode into town, led by an officer whose bearing marked him as career military. The townspeople watched warily from doorways and windows, memories of the recent violence still fresh. Doc stood on his porch, arms crossed as Blackwood and Eleanor joined him. Captain Lewis Hargrove, 5th Cavalry. The officer introduced himself, dismounting. I'm looking for Ethan Blackwood. Nashi, you found him, Blackwood answered, stepping forward. Hargrove's eyes widened slightly. So the reports were true. You are alive. He glanced at Blackwood's bandaged state. More or less. What do you want, Captain? To talk. Hargrove nodded to his men who remained mounted. Privately, inside Doc's sitting room, with Eleanor and Doc present, at Blackwood's insistence, Captain Hargrove came straight to the point. We've been tracking Blackwater's gang for months, he explained. Got word they'd been wiped out here. Most of them, Blackwood confirmed, including Blackwater himself, dead by my hand. Hargrove nodded as if confirming something he already knew. And the documents he carried, army documents, I believe. Blackwood's expression hardened. What documents? Hargrove smiled thinly. Please, Mr. Blackwood, we both know Blackwater stole sensitive material from an Army intelligence office 3 years ago. Material that could be misinterpreted in the wrong hands. Misinterpreted, Eleanor repeated, incredulous, like orders to abandon a town to murderers. Hargrove's gaze shifted to her. Ma'am, this is a military matter. It became my matter when your military sacrificed my sister and nephew, she shot back. The captain blinked, momentarily thrown. Your sister, Sarah Blackwood? Eleanor clarified, my sister Ethan's wife. One of 37 civilians your army left to die at Whispering Pines. Hargrove had the decency to look uncomfortable. That situation was complicated. It's quite simple from where I'm standing. Doc Montgomery interjected. Criminal, in fact. I'm not here to debate past actions. Hargrove said firmly, I'm here to recover stolen property. Those documents belong to the United States Army. And if I don't have them, Blackwood asked, then we search every building in this town until we find them. Hargrove's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Please don't make this difficult, Mr. Blackwood. You've served your country before. You understand the importance of following orders. I understood following honorable orders. Blackwood corrected, from honorable men. Tension filled the room. Outside, Sheriff Sullivan had arrived, positioning himself near Hargrove's waiting soldiers. The documents. Hargrove insisted. Blackwood exchanged glances with Eleanor and Doc. A silent communication passed between them. I burned them, Blackwood said. Finally, you what? Hargrove's composure cracked. After reading them, after confirming what I already suspected, that my commanding officer betrayed everyone at Whispering Pines to hide his corruption. That's a serious accusation, Hargrove warned. It's a serious crime, Blackwood countered, one that cost 37 innocent lives. Hargrove studied him, calculating, Without those documents, you have no proof. I don't need proof. I know the truth. And what do you intend to do with this truth? Blackwood's gaze never wavered. Nothing. Nothing? Hargrove repeated, suspicious. The men responsible are beyond my reach. Blackwood explained. Generals, politicians, men who give orders and never see the blood they spill. His voice hardened. But I see them, I know their names. And if anything happens to me or to anyone in this town, those names become public. Hargrove considered this. You expect me to believe you'd simply let this go after hunting Blackwater's men for 3 years? I've had my vengeance, Blackwood said quietly. The men who pulled the triggers are dead, the men who gave the orders. He shrugged. Their day will come, just not by my hand. For a long moment, Hargrove was silent, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. Very well, I'll report that the documents were destroyed in the fighting. Etched and Shadow Creek. These people? What about them? Hargrove asked. They're under my protection now. Blackwood set a dangerous edge to his voice. Remember that. Hargrove rose to leave. For what it's worth, Blackwood, not everyone in the army approved of what happened at Whispering Pines. Some of us believed you deserved better. Cold comfort to the dead, Blackwood replied. After Hargrove and his men rode out, Eleanor turned to Blackwood. You didn't burn the documents? No, he confirmed. But they believe I did. What will you do with them? Doc asked. Blackwood moved to the window, watching the dust of the departing patrol fade in the distance. Keep them as insurance. And after that, Eleanor pressed, when you're healed. Blackwood didn't answer immediately. The question of his future hung in the air, as uncertain as desert rain. I don't know, he admitted finally. For 3 years, I've been a ghost, a shadow. I'm not sure I remember how to be a man. Eleanor stepped beside him, her hand finding his. Then perhaps it's time to learn. That night, for the first time since Whispering Pines, Ethan Blackwood slept without dreaming of fire. The weeks that followed brought gradual healing, not just to Blackwood's body, but to Shadow Creek itself. Buildings damaged in the fighting were repaired, commerce resumed. People began to speak of the battle against the Ravens as a defining moment, a story to be told and retold. Blackwood remained at Doc Montgomery's, his recovery slower than he would have liked. Eleanor visited daily, bringing meals, books, company. They never spoke of Sarah directly, but her presence hovered between them. Not a barrier, but a connection neither had anticipated. One evening, Doc found Blackwood on the porch staring at the distant mountains. Sullivan's still waiting for your answer. Doc commented, settling into the adjacent chair. He'll be waiting a long time. Blackwood replied, because you're leaving. Blackwood didn't respond immediately. I've been thinking about what you said about living in the past, and I'm not sure I know how to live in the present. Blackwood's voice was quiet. The hunt, it became everything. Without it, you're just a man. Doc finished, flawed, uncertain, like the rest of us. Is that enough? Doc smiled faintly. It's all any of us get. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Tommy Montgomery ran up the road, excitement in his voice. Riders coming, he called from the south. Blackwood was on his feet instantly, instincts sharp despite his healing wounds. How many? Just 2, Tommy reported, but one's wearing a Texas Ranger badge. Doc and Blackwood exchanged glances. Rangers don't often come this far west. Doc noted. No, Blackwood agreed. They don't. They waited on the porch as the riders approached. A weathered man in his 50s wearing the distinctive star of a Texas Ranger, and a younger companion whose posture suggested military training. That's Captain Samuel Travers. Doc identified the Ranger. Known him years back, good man. The riders reined in at Doc's gate. Travers touched his hat in greeting. Doc Montgomery, he called. Been a while. Too long, Sam. Doc replied, what brings a Texas lawman to Arizona territory? Heard you had some excitement recently. Travers dismounted, his gaze fixing on Blackwood. And that the dark shadow had finally found his prey? Blackwood tensed. How do you know that name? Because I've been following your work for 3 years, Mr. Blackwood. Travers approached the porch. Most impressive hunt I've seen in 30 years of law enforcement. If you're here to arrest me, arrest you. Travers laughed. For what killing men wanted in 3 territories. He shook his head. No, sir, I'm here to offer you a job. Blackwood blinked. A job with Texas Rangers Special Investigations. Travers gestured to his companion. This is Lieutenant James Mercer. We're building a new unit. Men with particular skills to handle cases that cross boundaries that need a certain finesse. Manhunters. Blackwood translated in essence. Travers nodded. Your work tracking Blackwater's gang caught our attention. Someone with your abilities could do a lot of good. Blackwood's expression hardened. I'm done hunting men. Are you? Travers questioned. Or are you just between hunts? Same answer I gave Sheriff Sullivan. Blackwood said firmly, not interested. Travers nodded unsurprised. Sullivan mentioned you might say that. Also mentioned you might be taking his job instead. He mentioned wrong. What a shame. Travers said, world needs men like you. Blackwood men who understand darkness because they've walked in it. That's precisely why they don't need me. Blackwood countered. The conversation was interrupted by Eleanor's arrival. She assessed the situation quickly, noting the tension in Blackwood's posture. Everything all right? She asked, climbing the porch steps. Just fine, ma'am, Travers assured her. Captain Travers, Texas Rangers. Just having a word with Mr. Blackwood here about trying to steal him away from your town, Travers admitted with a smile, though it seems he's not inclined to be stolen. Eleanor's eyes met. Blackwood's briefly. No, she agreed. He's not. The exchange wasn't lost on Travers. He studied them both, understanding dawning in his weathered face. Well, he said, touching his hat. We'll be in town until tomorrow if you change your mind. Mr. Blackwood Montgomery, always good to see you. As the Rangers headed toward town, Doc turned to Blackwood. That's 2 job offers in as many weeks. For a man with no future plans, you're in high demand. 3 job offers. Eleanor corrected, though mine was less official. Yours, Blackwood asked. The Eagle's Nest could use a partner. She said simply, someone who knows how to keep the peace without drawing a gun every time. Blackwood stared at her, caught off guard. A saloon owner. Among other things. Her gaze was steady. Shadow Creek's growing. There'll be opportunities for a man willing to put down roots. I haven't had roots in a long time, Blackwood admitted. All the more reason to plant some, Doc suggested, before you forget how. Later that night, as Blackwood sat alone on the porch, the decision still weighing on him, Sheriff Sullivan arrived. The old lawman settled heavily into a chair, his face troubled. Travers told you about his offer. Sullivan asked. Blackwood nodded. And I gave him the same answer I gave you. Figured as much. Sullivan was quiet for a moment. There's something you should know. Something Joseph Miller told me before he passed. Blackwood's attention sharpened. Miller died. Last night, peaceful in his sleep. Sullivan sighed. But he left a confession of sorts about Whispering Pines. A cold feeling settled in Blackwood's stomach. What about it? He was there, Sullivan said quietly, not during the massacre, after. As part of the ranger unit that investigated, he said they were kept out by the army. Blackwood recalled, some were. But Joseph, he saw things. Things that didn't match the official report. What things? Sullivan met his gaze directly. Evidence that someone in Whispering Pines warned Blackwater's gang about the money, gave them away in a collaborator. The words hit Blackwood like physical blows. That's not possible. Everyone in town was killed. Not everyone, Sullivan countered. One man survived away on a scouting mission. The implication hung in the air, monstrous, unthinkable. You're saying I was suspected? Blackwood asked, his voice dangerously soft. Joseph never believed it, Sullivan assured him. But others did. It's why the army shut down the investigation so quickly. They needed a scapegoat, and a scout, who miraculously escaped the massacre, fit the bill. Why tell me this now? Because Travers brought it up again. Sullivan admitted he doesn't believe it either, said the timing never made sense, but he thinks someone high up in Army intelligence used those suspicions to bury the whole affair. Blackwood sat in stunned silence, the revelation shifting his understanding of the past 3 years. Not just a grieving husband and father seeking justice, but a suspect evading suspicion through vengeance. There's more, Sullivan continued reluctantly. Travers thinks someone in the Army has been tracking you. That's how Captain Hargrove found us so quickly after Blackwater's death. Watching me hunt the ravens. Blackwood realized, making sure I eliminated all witnesses before silencing me too. Exactly. Sullivan leaned forward. Which is why you need to make a decision, son. Stay here as my deputy, where we can watch your back. Or take Travers' offer and get the protection of the Rangers. There's a third option, Blackwood said quietly. Running won't solve this, Sullivan warned. They'll find you eventually. I'm not talking about running, Blackwood clarified. I'm talking about finishing what I started. Sullivan stared at him. Going after Army officers, that's suicide. Not going after them, Blackwood corrected, drawing them out. Using myself as bait, just like I did with Blackwater. And who protects Shadow Creek while you're playing target? Sullivan demanded. These people count on you now, whether you ask for it or not. The words struck home, carrying more weight than Sullivan could have known. For 3 years, Blackwood had thought only of the dead of his lost family, but now living people depended on him, had fought beside him, bled for him. I need time to think, he said finally. Sullivan nodded, rising to leave. Don't take too long. Word is Hargrove's patrol is headed back this way. After the sheriff departed, Blackwood remained on the porch, staring into the darkness. The past he thought resolved had returned more complicated than ever. The vengeance he'd lived for now seemed hollow, a distraction from deeper corruption. He didn't hear Eleanor approach until she spoke from the shadows. You're leaving, aren't you? She asked softly. Blackwood looked up. How long were you listening? Long enough. She moved into the moonlight. You're going after the men who really ordered Whispering Pines. I have to, he said simply. As long as they're out there, none of us are safe. Not me, not you, not this town. Eleanor sat beside him. Then I'm coming with you. No, he said immediately. This isn't your fight. Sarah was my sister. She reminded him, James was my nephew. It became my fight the moment you walked into my saloon. Blackwood shook his head. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than facing Blackwater, than helping defend this town against the ravens. She fixed him with a determined stare. I'm not asking permission, Ethan. He studied her in the moonlight, the set of her jaw, the resolve in her eyes, so like Sarah, in features yet entirely her own person. Stronger perhaps, more hardened by life's cruelties. Why, he asked finally, why risk everything for a man you barely know? Because I know enough, she answered. I know you're a good man who's seen too much darkness. I know you deserve better than ending up another body buried in some unmarked grave. She paused, and because I've been alone too long, same as you. The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Blackwood felt something stir within him, an emotion he'd thought long dead. There's no guarantee we'd survive, he warned. There never is, she replied. Not for any of us. Blackwood's decision crystallized in that moment, not just about the hunt to come, but about the life that might follow. We'll need help. He said we have it. Eleanor assured him, Sullivan, Doc, even Travers, I suspect. And after, Blackwood asked the question he'd been avoiding for weeks. If we succeed, what then? Eleanor's hand found his in the darkness. Then we come home to Shadow Creek. The word home echoed in Blackwood's mind, foreign yet familiar, like a melody half remembered from childhood. Home, he repeated softly. I'd like that. Dawn found them on Doc's porch, watching the sun transform the desert from silver to gold. They had talked through the night, planning, arguing, eventually agreeing. Now as birds began their morning songs, a strange peace had settled over Blackwood. You look different, Doc commented, joining them with coffee. Do I? Blackwood asked, less haunted. Doc clarified, more present. Blackwood considered this. I feel different, he admitted, like waking from a long nightmare. That's what healing looks like, Doc said simply. Their conversation was interrupted by Tommy Montgomery running full speed up the road. Captain Hargrove, the boy shouted, back with more soldiers, looking for you, Mr. Blackwood. The peaceful moment shattered. Blackwood was on his feet instantly. How many? He demanded. 20 at least. Tommy reported all armed. Doc turned to Blackwood. Your documents, where are they? Hidden at my ranch. Blackwood answered, in the root cellar. I'll get Sullivan. Eleanor said already moving. Blackwood caught her arm. No, get Travers. Tell him everything. The Rangers need to know what's happening here. She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. What about you? I'll deal with Hargrove, Blackwood said grimly. Buy you time. Ethan, she began. Trust me. He cut her off. I'm not planning to die today. As Eleanor and Tommy raced toward town, Doc gave Blackwood a searching look. You have a plan, he stated always. Blackwood checked his Colt. But I need your help. 10 minutes later, Captain Hargrove and his patrol surrounded Doc Montgomery's house. The soldiers took positions with practiced efficiency, weapons trained on doors and windows. Blackwood. Hargrove called, come out. We need to talk. The door opened slowly. Doc Montgomery emerged, hands raised. Captain, he greeted calmly. Quite a reception for a house call. Where is he, Doctor? Hargrove demanded. My patient resting. Doc replied, Doctor's orders. This isn't a game, Hargrove warned. We know he lied about the documents. We know he still has them. Then you know more than I do, Doc said evenly. Hargrove nodded to two soldiers who pushed past Doc into the house. They returned moments later. Empty, sir, one reported. No sign of Blackwood. Hargrove's face hardened. Search the property, every building, every shed. As the soldiers fanned out, Doc remained calm. Captain, this is a peaceful town. We've seen enough violence recently. This doesn't concern you, Doctor. Hargrove dismissed him. A military occupation of civilian property most certainly concerns me. Doc countered. On whose authority are you acting? The United States Army. Which answers to civilian authority, came a new voice. All heads turned to see Sheriff Sullivan approaching badge, gleaming in the morning sun. Behind him walked Captain Travers of the Texas Rangers and Eleanor Hayes. Sheriff Hargrove acknowledged coldly, this is a military matter. In my town, Sullivan corrected, on my watch. With all due respect, Captain Hargrove. Travers interrupted, stepping forward. Samuel Travers, Texas Rangers. I'd like to see your orders if you don't mind. This is outside Ranger jurisdiction. Hargrove objected. Maybe so. Travers agreed amiably. But when 20 armed soldiers surround a civilian home in a peaceful town, folks get curious. His hand rested casually near his sidearm. Now about those orders. Tension crackled in the air. Hargrove's soldiers looked uncertainly between their captain and the new arrivals. From the corner of his eye, Doc Montgomery noticed movement at the edge of his property. Blackwood moving silently through the trees, positioning himself behind Hargrove's men. Captain, Doc said, drawing attention back to himself. Perhaps we could discuss this reasonably. Like civilized men. There's nothing to discuss. Hargrove insisted. Blackwood has stolen military documents. Their recovery is non-negotiable. And what do these documents contain? Travers pressed. Must be mighty important to warrant this show of force. That's classified. Hargrove snapped. Classified. Travers repeated thoughtfully, or incriminating. Hargrove's face flushed. Watch yourself, Ranger. You're dangerously close to interfering with a military operation. Now there's where you're wrong, came Blackwood's voice from behind the soldiers. All eyes turned to Ethan. Blackwood stood at the edge of the trees, his Colt drawn, but held casually at his side. Blackwood, Hargrove breathed. Captain. Blackwood acknowledged. Quite a reception committee, I'm flattered. Hargrove recovered quickly. You're under arrest for theft of classified military documents? Interesting charge. Blackwood replied. Given that those documents detail the murder of 37 American citizens by your superiors? The soldiers exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the mission they'd been briefed on. That's a lie, Hargrove declared, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Blackwood moved forward slowly, his eyes never leaving Hargrove. Should we ask your men what they were told about this mission, about why they're surrounding a doctor's house in a civilian town? Hargrove's hand moved toward his pistol. This is your last warning. Blackwood, surrender the documents. I can't do that, Blackwood said calmly. Those papers are the only justice the people of Whispering Pines will ever see. Then you leave me no choice. Hargrove began to draw Sheriff Sullivan's revolver cocked loudly. I wouldn't, Captain. Not unless you want this to get very ugly very fast. The tableau held, Blackwood and Hargrove facing each other, Sullivan and Travers flanking them, soldiers caught in the middle of a confrontation they hadn't anticipated. Your men didn't sign up for this, Blackwood told Hargrove. They joined to protect their country, not to cover up massacres. You don't understand what's at stake, Hargrove insisted. I understand perfectly. Blackwood countered. Men in high places gave orders that killed innocent people. Now they're afraid of being exposed. It was war, Hargrove said desperately. Difficult decisions had to be made. War. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice tight with anger. Against women and children, against a mining town. The soldiers' unease grew visibly. Whatever they'd been told about this mission, it clearly hadn't included these details. Captain, one of the soldiers ventured. What's he talking about? Stand down, Private. Hargrove ordered. Let me make this simple. Blackwood interrupted. The documents are secured. If anything happens to me, to Sheriff Sullivan, to anyone in this town, copies go to every newspaper in the territory. Hargrove's face paled. You're bluffing. 3 years hunting ravens taught me to prepare for every contingency. Blackwood replied. I've had weeks to arrange this. Do you really want to test me? For a long moment, Hargrove stood frozen, calculation and fear warring in his eyes. Finally, his shoulders slumped. Lower your weapons? He ordered his men, a wise choice, Travers commented, stepping forward. Now I believe we were discussing your orders, Captain. I have nothing to show you, Hargrove admitted, because this isn't an official mission. Blackwood concluded, your superiors sent you off the books. Deniability. Hargrove's silence was confirmation enough. Here's what happens now. Blackwood said, you and your men ride out. You tell whoever sent you that the documents are secured against any attempt to recover them. You explain that any further action against me or Shadow Creek will result in immediate publication. Why they won't stop, Hargrove warned. Men like them never do. Then they'll learn what the Ravens learned. Blackwood replied, his voice deadly quiet. What happens when they hunt the hunter? Tension hung in the air for a heartbeat longer. Then Hargrove nodded, defeat evident in his posture. Mount up, he ordered his men. As the soldiers prepared to depart, Hargrove turned back to Blackwood. For what it's worth, I never knew the full story about Whispering Pines, not until recently. And now that you do, now I wonder which side I've been serving. Hargrove admitted. He hesitated, then added, watch your back. Blackwood men like General Williams don't forgive, and they don't forget. Williams. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. He's behind this. He's been promoted since Whispering Pines has the ear of the Secretary of War. Now, Hargrove mounted his horse, and he's been hunting you as long as you've been hunting ravens. With that parting revelation, Hargrove led his men away, dust rising behind them as they rode out of Shadow Creek. Williams. Blackwood murmured, my commanding officer, the man who sent you away that day. Eleanor realized. Travers stepped closer. This changes things. Blackwood, a general with War Department connections, that's a dangerous enemy. I've faced dangerous enemies before, Blackwood replied. Not like this. Sullivan warned. Blackwater was just a man. Williams is a system. Blackwood turned to Travers. Your offer, is it still open? The Ranger's job. Travers nodded. With certain modifications, such as making your first assignment an investigation into what really happened at Whispering Pines official this time, with Ranger backing. Blackwood considered this in Shadow Creek. We can provide protection, Travers assured him. My unit specializes in cases like this. Corruption, abuse of power. Aunt, it's not just about protection, Blackwood said quietly. This is my home now. The words surprised even him, but as he spoke them, he realized their truth. Somewhere in the past weeks, amid blood and battle and healing, Shadow Creek had become more than just the stage for his final confrontation with Blackwater. Eleanor moved to his side. We'll be here when you return. She said, after you finish this last hunt, Blackwood asked, the town, she clarified. Then more softly, and me, Travers and Sullivan exchanged knowing glances. Well, Doc Montgomery broke the moment. Seems like decisions have been made. How about we discuss details over breakfast? I don't know about the rest of you, but facing down an army patrol works up an appetite. As they walked toward Doc's house, Blackwood felt a strange lightness. Not the emptiness that had followed Blackwater's death, but something more promising. The hunt wasn't over, but its nature had changed. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about justice, about truth, about protecting what he'd found in Shadow Creek. 2 days later, Ethan Blackwood stood on the porch of his ranch house. Repaired, restored, no longer just a fortress, but a home. His few possessions were packed, his horse saddled for the journey ahead. Eleanor waited beside her own mount, prepared to accompany him as far as the territorial capital, where Travers would officially deputize Blackwood into the Rangers' Special Investigations Unit. You don't have to go, Sullivan said, having ridden out to see them off. We could protect you here. It's not about protection, Blackwood replied. It's about finishing what I started, about making sure what happened at Whispering Pines never happens again. Akur, just make sure you come back. Sullivan admonished, town needs you. I will, Blackwood promised and meant it. Doc Montgomery approached carrying a leather medical bag. Thought you might need this, he said, handing it to Blackwood. Fully stocked, should handle any trouble you encounter. Thank you, Blackwood said, genuinely touched. Just come back in one piece. Doc instructed, I've invested too much time patching you up to start over. Tommy Montgomery, standing beside his father, looked up at Blackwood with admiration. Will you tell me about it when you get back? The adventure? Blackwood's expression softened. Some of it? He promised. The parts fit for young ears. As they prepared to mount up, Eleanor surveyed the ranch. The land Blackwood had chosen, had fought for, had begun to make his own. It will be waiting for you, she said quietly. For us, he corrected. Their eyes met, an understanding passing between them. Not love, not yet. Both carried too many ghosts for that. But possibility, a future neither had dared imagine months before. Blackwood mounted his horse, feeling the familiar weight of his Colt at his hip. But unlike the past 3 years, the weapon no longer defined him. It was a tool, not his purpose. One last hunt. He said more to himself than those gathered. And then, Eleanor asked, mounting beside him. Blackwood looked at the town in the distance, then back to the ranch, to the people who had become more than allies, who had become family. And then we come home, he said simply. As they rode away, the rising sun at their backs, casting long shadows before them, Ethan Blackwood felt the dark shadow receding. Not gone. That part of him would always exist, a necessity in a world where men like Williams wielded power without conscience, but no longer his entire being, no longer his only identity. Behind them, Shadow Creek waited ahead, justice and truth, and beyond that, something Blackwood had thought forever lost after Whispering Pines. A future. The territorial capital of Prescott bustled with activity. Miners, merchants, soldiers, and settlers flowing through its streets like tributaries of a human river. After weeks in Shadow Creek, the crowds felt overwhelming to Blackwood, each face a potential threat, each glance a possible recognition. Captain Travers led Blackwood and Eleanor to the Rangers' temporary headquarters, a modest building near the courthouse. Inside, Lieutenant Mercer and 2 other men waited, their weathered faces marking them as veterans of frontier law enforcement. Gentlemen, Travers announced, this is Ethan Blackwood. The men studied him with frank curiosity. His reputation had clearly preceded him. The dark shadow, one murmured, that name stays outside. Travers instructed firmly. In here, he's Deputy Blackwood's Special Investigations Unit. The formalities were brief. Blackwood swore an oath, received a ranger badge that he tucked inside his coat, rather than pinning it openly, and signed the necessary documents. Now, Travers said, rolling out a map on the central table, "Let's discuss General Williams." Over the next hour, Travers outlined what they knew. Williams had risen quickly after the Whispering Pines incident, leveraging political connections in Washington to secure promotion after promotion. Now he commanded the military district of the Southwest, headquartered in Santa Fe. He's built quite a power base, Mercer explained. Controls military, contracting throughout the territory. Word is he's eyeing a political appointment next. Using blood money, Eleanor said grimly. Money's only part of it. Travers added, the operation at Whispering Pines. It wasn't just about funds based on the documents Blackwood recovered. They were running unsanctioned operations against civilian targets suspected of aiding hostile tribes. War crimes. Blackwood translated, precisely if exposed, it would end not just Williams's career, but those of several high-ranking officers and officials, which explains their determination to recover those documents. Eleanor concluded, and to silence you, Travers told Blackwood, the last living witness. Blackwood absorbed this information, fitting it into his understanding of the past 3 years. So my hunt for Blackwater's men was convenient for Williams, Travers confirmed. You were eliminating potential witnesses while maintaining your status as a rogue vigilante, easily discredited if you ever went public with the truth. Until I stopped hunting, Blackwood realized, until I settled in Shadow Creek and became a threat again. Travers nodded, especially after you killed Blackwater and secured those documents. Eleanor, who had remained mostly silent, studied the map thoughtfully. What's your plan? Captain, you can't simply march into Santa Fe and arrest a general. No, Travers agreed. We need evidence beyond the documents. Witnesses' corroboration, a case too strong to be buried again. There are 3 men still alive who served under Williams during that period. Mercer reported a Major Hollister in Denver, Captain Reynolds in Tucson, and Lieutenant Gaines' location unknown. Find them, Travers ordered quietly, and Williams himself. Blackwood asked, we watch. Travers said simply, we build our case, and when the time is right, we move. How long? Eleanor pressed. Weeks, maybe months. Travers met her gaze. This isn't a quick-draw showdown, Mrs. Hayes. We're dismantling a conspiracy that reaches to Washington. It takes time. Blackwood felt the familiar pull of impatience, the instinct that had driven him through 3 years of hunting, but he suppressed it, recognizing the wisdom in Travers' approach. What's my role? He asked. For now, you stay hidden. Travers decided, Williams believes you're still in Shadow Creek. We'll use that. I should be helping with the investigation, Blackwood objected. You will be, Travers assured him, just not in the field. Not yet, you're too recognizable and Williams has too many eyes. The meeting concluded with assignments and schedules. As the Rangers dispersed, Travers took Blackwood aside. One more thing, the captain said quietly. I've arranged protection for Shadow Creek. 2 of my best men posing as cowhands. They'll keep watch while you're away. Thank you, Blackwood said, genuinely grateful. Don't thank me yet, Travers warned. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Williams won't go down without a fight. That evening in a small hotel room secured by the Rangers, Blackwood and Eleanor faced their imminent separation. I don't like leaving you here alone, she said, watching him clean his Colt with practiced movements. I won't be alone, he replied. And you need to get back to Shadow Creek. The town needs you more than I do. The town, maybe, but what about you? His hands stilled. I've been alone a long time, Eleanor. That's not an answer. He set the gun aside, looked up at her. What do you want me to say? The truth, she said simply. Are you coming back, or is this hunt going to consume you like the last one? The question hung between them, honest and unadorned. Blackwood considered his answer carefully. 3 years ago, when I started hunting Blackwater, I had nothing to return to. He said finally, nothing to live for beyond vengeance. He rose, moved to the window, stared out at the twilit street below. But now, he struggled to find the words. Shadow Creek changed something. You changed something. What? He turned to her. I want a future, he admitted. For the first time since Whispering Pines, I can imagine a life after this is over. Eleanor crossed to him, her eyes searching his face. Promise me, she said, her voice low and intense. Promise me you'll remember that when things get dark, when the hunt takes you to places where it would be easier to become the shadow again. Blackwood took her hands in his. I promise. In the silence that followed, some barrier between them shifted, weakened. Eleanor leaned forward, her lips finding his in a kiss both tender and fierce. A promise, a claim, a connection neither had sought but both had found. When they parted, something had changed between them. An acknowledgement of possibilities of a future beyond justice and vengeance. I'll come back, Blackwood assured her. I'll hold you to that, Ethan Blackwood, she replied. Count on it. The following morning they parted, Eleanor returning to Shadow Creek with an escort of rangers, Blackwood remaining in Prescott to begin the investigation that would consume the coming weeks. Days stretched into weeks as the rangers' investigation proceeded methodically. Travers established Blackwood in a small house on the outskirts of town, where he pored over documents, maps, and reports, building a comprehensive picture of Williams's operation. Major Hollister was located in Denver, but proved uncooperative, refusing to speak with Rangers agents Captain Reynolds in Tucson, was more forthcoming, though hesitant, confirming parts of what the documents revealed, but stopping short of directly implicating Williams. Lieutenant Gaines remained elusive, reported to have headed deep into New Mexico territory after leaving the Army under unclear circumstances. Through it all, Blackwood felt the tension building, a storm gathering on the horizon. Williams hadn't survived and thrived this long by being careless. The general would be watching, waiting, planning his counterattack. Letters from Eleanor provided Blackwood's only real connection to Shadow Creek. She reported that all remained peaceful, that Sullivan was considering retirement in earnest, that Doc Montgomery had taken on a young apprentice. Life continued, the town healed, and in her carefully chosen words, Blackwood found something he'd thought lost forever, a sense of belonging, of home. 1 month into the investigation, Lieutenant Mercer burst into Blackwood's quarters late at night, his expression grim. We found Gaines, he announced without preamble. Blackwood set aside the maps he'd been studying. Where's Silver Creek mining camp southeast of Santa Fe? Mercer's face tightened. But we're too late. He was murdered 3 days ago. Cold certainty settled in Blackwood's gut. Williams got to him first. Looks that way. Ranger who found him said it was made to look like a robbery gone wrong, but the killing was too professional. Mercer shook his head, shot once from behind at close range. Williams is cleaning house. Blackwood realized, eliminating witnesses. Captain Travers thinks the same. He's called for us to meet him at the office immediately. The Ranger headquarters was tense when they arrived. Travers stood over a map marking positions with grim efficiency. 2 other Rangers were checking weapons, preparing for deployment. Gaines is just the beginning, Travers said without looking up. If Williams is eliminating witnesses, Reynolds in Tucson is next. Then we warn him, Blackwood suggested, bring him in for protection. Already sent word, Travers confirmed, but Williams has a head start. What about Hollister in Denver? Too far for Williams to reach quickly. We've alerted the Denver office to watch him. Travers straightened, his expression hardening. But this changes our timeline. We can no longer afford to build our case slowly. What's the plan? Blackwood asked. We move on Reynolds immediately. Get his sworn testimony before Williams' men can silence him. Travers nodded to the waiting Rangers. Cooper and Davis ride for Tucson tonight. I should go with them. Blackwood insisted. No. Travers was firm. You're still our ace in the hole. Williams doesn't know we've connected. Keeping you hidden gives us an advantage. An advantage for what? For when we move on, Williams himself, Travers explained, which may be sooner than we planned. The meeting continued deep into the night, contingencies, discussed plans adjusted. By dawn, Cooper and Davis were riding hard for Tucson, carrying documents for Reynolds to sign orders for his protection. But Blackwood's instincts told him it wouldn't be enough. Williams had clearly decided to take action. The game had changed. 2 days later, his fears were confirmed. Cooper returned alone, his face ashen, his horse nearly dead from exhaustion. "Reynolds is dead," he reported. Williams's men got there first. Davis stayed in Tucson trying to track them. Travers cursed viciously. "How professional job." Cooper explained, made to look like a heart attack, but the doctor who examined him found a needle mark at the base of his skull. Blackwood listened in silence, his mind racing. Williams was moving faster than they had anticipated, with resources they hadn't accounted for. "What about Hollister?" he asked. "Still alive, last report." Travers said, "But now our most vulnerable witness, and our only one." Blackwood pointed out. Travers paced the room, calculating. "We need to move him. Bring him here where we can protect him properly. If Williams has reached this far, nowhere is safe." Blackwood argued, "Not even Ranger headquarters." The words hung in the air, their implications clear. Williams' reach extended throughout the territories into military and civilian institutions alike. "Then what do you suggest?" Travers demanded. Blackwood's response was immediate. "We take the fight to him in Santa Fe." "That's suicide." Cooper objected, "Walking into his stronghold." "Not walking in." Blackwood clarified, drawing him out. "How?" Travers asked, suddenly interested, with the one thing he wants more than anything. Blackwood said, "Me." The plan came together over the next hours. Audacious, dangerous, but with the advantage of surprise. Blackwood would appear in Santa Fe, making his presence known, drawing Williams' attention and resources. Meanwhile, Travers and a hand-picked team would extract Hollister from Denver, bringing him to a secure location where his testimony could be properly documented. "It's too risky," Mercer argued. "If Williams captures you—" "He won't." Blackwood assured him, "I spent 3 years as a ghost. I can do it again." "This isn't hunting ravens," Travers warned. "Williams has the entire army at his disposal." "Not officially," Blackwood countered. "He can't exactly issue orders to capture me without explaining why he'll use covert assets men. He trusts a smaller group easier to avoid. Or to confront." Travers realized, studying Blackwood's face. "That's your real plan, isn't it? Not just distraction, but confrontation." Blackwood didn't deny it. "Williams is the head of the snake. Cut it off and the rest dies." "We are still lawmen." Travers reminded him, "This isn't about assassination. It's about justice." Blackwood corrected, "In whatever form it takes." The two men stared at each other, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Finally, Travers nodded. "Very well," he conceded. "But you're not going alone. Mercer goes with you." Blackwood started to object, but Travers cut him off. "Non-negotiable." "You're a ranger now, Blackwood. We work together." Preparations moved quickly. After that, Blackwood wrote a letter to Eleanor, not explaining the plan, not promising his return, but reaffirming what they'd found together, what waited after justice was served. By midnight, he and Mercer were riding northwest toward Santa Fe, the documents from Whispering Pines secured in Blackwood's saddlebags. Travers and his team headed northeast for Denver, racing to reach Hollister before Williams's men. The hunt had come full circle. For 3 years, Blackwood had pursued those responsible for Whispering Pines. Now he would become the hunted once more, drawing his final target into a trap of his own making. Santa Fe sprawled across the high desert plateau, its adobe buildings glowing golden in the afternoon sun. Blackwood and Mercer observed from a ridge outside town, planning their approach. "Williams's headquarters is there." Mercer pointed to a walled compound flying the Army flag. "He lives in the old governor's mansion on the plaza." "Security?" Blackwood asked. "Standard military complement, plus his personal guard, ex-soldiers handpicked for loyalty." Blackwood studied the town's layout, committing it to memory, and our contact, Maria Vasquez. Mercer replied, "Owns the cantina on the south side. Ranger informant for years." "Can she be trusted with this?" Travers trusts her, Mercer said simply. That's good enough for me. They entered Santa Fe separately as dusk approached. Mercer first making his way to Maria's cantina to establish their base of operations. Blackwood an hour later moving through shadows avoiding military patrols. The Cantina del Sol was crowded when Blackwood slipped through its back entrance. Maria Vasquez, a handsome woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and a natural dignity, led him to a small room behind the kitchen where Mercer waited. "So you are the famous Dark Shadow," she said, studying Blackwood. "You look like an ordinary man to me." "That's the point," Blackwood replied. She nodded approval. "Good ordinary men survive longer." She turned to Mercer. "The room upstairs is prepared. No one will disturb you." "What about Williams?" Blackwood asked. "His movements, his men?" "The general keeps to his routines," Maria reported. Headquarters in the morning lunch at the Officers Club, afternoons at the mansion dinner at La Paloma restaurant 3 times a week. Predictable, Mercer noted, confident. "As a man in his position should be," Maria agreed. "But since yesterday, there is a change. More guards, more patrols." Blackwood and Mercer exchanged glances. "He knows something's coming," Blackwood concluded. "Or someone," Mercer added. The following morning, Blackwood made his first move, appearing briefly near the plaza, allowing himself to be glimpsed by a military patrol. He disappeared before they could react, but the sighting would reach Williams soon enough. By midday, the change in Santa Fe was palpable. Military presence doubled, soldiers checking travelers at town entrances, plainclothes men watching the plaza and major streets. "He's taken the bait," Mercer observed from their window overlooking the street. "Now, to set the hook," Blackwood replied. That evening he left a message at Williams' favorite restaurant. A playing card slipped under the general's usual table. The ace of spades, the death card with whispering pines, written across it in small, precise letters. By the next morning, Santa Fe was in lockdown. Williams had pulled in every available man, concentrating them around his headquarters and residence. Fear had replaced confidence, exactly as Blackwood intended. Time for the next phase. He told Mercer, the direct approach. "You're not seriously considering—" "I am." Blackwood checked his Colt. "Williams is expecting an assassin in the shadows. Let's give him something different." Travers said to wait for his signal. Mercer objected. "Hollister. Hollister is either safely with Travers by now, or he's dead." Blackwood cut him off. "Either way, we proceed." Against Mercer's continued protest, Blackwood prepared for his most audacious move yet, walking straight into the heart of Williams' power. As noon approached, General Marcus Williams sat in his office at Army headquarters, surrounded by armed guards. At 55, Williams remained an imposing figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the bearing of a man accustomed to unquestioned authority. His steel-gray hair and meticulously trimmed beard gave him a distinguished appearance that served him well in political circles. But today that composure was cracking. The ace of spades lay on his desk, a mocking reminder of the past he thought buried. "Report," he snapped at his aide. "No further sightings, sir." The young lieutenant replied, "But we've doubled the patrols as ordered." Williams scowled. "Not good enough. He's here, I can feel it." "Sir,"